They say that a professional camera lens never lies, that it is a cold, unfeeling piece of calibrated glass designed to capture the absolute, unvarnished truth of a single fraction of a second and freeze it in digital memory forever. But what the seasoned cinematographers and the industry veterans never tell you when they hand you a high-end cinema rig is that a lens can also become a shield, a physical, heavy barricade that you desperately hide behind so that the rest of the world cannot look into your eyes and see your entire soul fracturing into a million jagged pieces. For exactly 10 years, 3,650 days, I was her shadow, her protector, her absolute best friend, and the keeper of every single secret she ever whispered in the dark. I was the one who held her hair back when she was violently sick from the stress of exams. I was the one who stayed awake until the pale light of dawn crept over the city skyline, helping her study the complex geometry of architectural designs. And I was the only person alive who knew the exact, intricate cadence of her laughter when she was genuinely happy versus when she was just trying to satisfy a room full of strangers. Yet today, on this blindingly bright, suffocatingly warm Saturday afternoon, my fingers are shaking so violently that I can barely adjust the manual focus ring of my lens. Today, I am not the man standing beside her at the grand marble altar, adjusting his tie and waiting to link his life to hers until the end of time. Today, I am simply the hired hand, the anonymous videographer sitting in the shadows of the cathedral, paid a standard commercial fee to document her fairytale wedding to a man I have spent the last 12 months trying not to hate. The small, circular viewfinder of my camera is a ruthlessly cruel storyteller, a tiny window that forces me to observe my own execution in high-definition resolution. As my index finger presses the cold, red record button on the side of the magnesium body, the internal system lets out a faint, imperceptible pulse, and the green tally light begins to blink rhythmically in the darkness of the nave, signaling that the digital tape is rolling. Instantly, her face fills the frame, washing away the rest of the physical world until nothing else exists except her image burning through the sensor. Clara looks absolutely, devastatingly breathtaking. The white silk wedding gown she wears cascades around her delicate frame like a frozen mountain waterfall, catching the ambient golden hour light streaming through the massive stained glass windows of the old church. The intricate lace of her veil frames her face perfectly, dusting across her shoulders like fallen snow, highlighting the porcelain texture of her skin and the soft, subtle rose color of her cheeks. She is standing in the holding room with her bridesmaids, sharing a loud, radiant laugh that rings through the hollow stone corridors, a laugh that used to belong entirely to me, a laugh that I spent a decade cultivating through inside jokes, late-night diner runs, and shared vulnerabilities. Through the ultra-sharp display of my monitor, I am forced into a state of hyper-observation, analyzing the exact micro-expression of her eyes, the tiny, familiar crinkle of her nose that happens exclusively when she is trying to hide her true anxiety from the people around her. My chest tightens with a familiar, suffocating ache, a heavy pressure that feels like physical concrete being poured into my lungs, making the simple act of breathing an agonizing task. Every single frame I capture feels like a calculated, deliberate insult to my sanity, a beautiful form of psychological torture that I voluntarily signed up for because the alternative, the thought of some anonymous stranger directing the visual legacy of her wedding day, was a tragedy I could not bear to allow. The heavy, resonant chords of the pipe organ suddenly begin to reverberate through the massive stone architecture of the cathedral, signaling the official commencement of the ceremony and shattering the fragile peace of my workspace. The deep, rumbling frequencies travel through the floorboards, vibrating through the metal legs of my heavy carbon fiber tripod and settling directly into the soles of my shoes. I look away from Clara for a brief second to pan the camera toward the front of the church, where the groom is standing on the elevated marble platform. His name is Julian, a man whose life is a flawless collection of corporate achievements, tailored Italian suits, and an effortless, aristocratic confidence that makes people like me feel entirely invisible. I watch him adjust the silk lapels of his tuxedo through my viewfinder, his face twisted into an expression of nervous anticipation, the look of a man who knows he has won the ultimate prize and is simply waiting for the clock to run out. A bitter, toxic wave of resentment washes over my tongue, a dark emotion that I have fought desperately to suppress for the sake of Clara's happiness. But seeing him stand there, in the exact spot where I had played out 1,000 silent mental rehearsals over the last decade, makes my blood run cold. The camera forces a strange, emotional detachment onto my mind, turning me into a passive historian of my own undoing. As I adjust the focal length, zooming out to capture the grand, sweeping architecture of the church as the guests begin to stand up, my thoughts are violently thrown backward into the deep, unedited archives of my memory. 10 years ago, on a freezing, rain-drenched Tuesday afternoon during our junior year of high school, Clara and I found ourselves stranded under the leaking rusted corrugated roof of an old bus stop on the edge of the city. We were drenched to the bone, shivering from the autumn wind, but we were huddled so close together that I could feel the heat radiating from her blazer. We were sharing a single pair of cheap, tangled wired headphones, listening to a bootleg acoustic track on a looping playlist while the traffic splashed dirty water onto the asphalt in front of us. She had turned her head to look at me, her eyes shining with that raw, unfiltered innocence that the world hadn't managed to ruin yet, and she had whispered that if she ever found a way to escape our small town and get married, she wanted her wedding video to feel like poetry, not a commercial, not a stage production, but a living, breathing piece of art that captured the invisible strings connecting two souls. I had laughed, my teenage heart overflowing with a terrifying amount of unsaid devotion, and I had promised her that no matter where we ended up in life, I would be the one to handle the camera, that I would make her look like a queen captured in golden light. I kept that promise. I spent years studying cinematic lighting, investing thousands of dollars into high-end optics, and refining my craft, all driven by the silent, guiding North Star of that rainy Tuesday afternoon. But back then, in the naive, beautiful arrogance of my adolescent mind, I had always naturally assumed that the poetry we would create would be about us. I never once, even in my darkest nightmares, imagined that my ultimate masterpiece, the definitive visual layout of my entire career, would be a chronological love letter documenting her permanent departure into the arms of a stranger. The massive wooden doors at the back of the chapel swing open with a slow, dramatic thud, and a collective whisper ripples through the sea of guests as the entire crowd turns their heads toward the entrance. Clara's father, a tall, graying man who had treated me like a second son for a third of my life, steps into the light, his arm locked firmly within Clara's. The cinematic lighting of the cathedral is perfect. The morning storm had cleared just an hour ago, leaving the atmosphere crisp and allowing long, dramatic shafts of white sunlight to cut through the high windows, illuminating the dust motes floating in the air like shimmering diamonds. I adjust my exposure settings, pulling the focus smoothly from the background crowd onto Clara's face as she begins a slow, rhythmic march down the long, carpeted aisle. The tracking autofocus of my camera locks onto her eyes with terrifying precision, the tiny green square on my monitor dancing across her iris as she moves closer and closer to the altar. The crowd around her is a beautiful, expensive blur of colorful dresses and dark suits, completely smoothed out by the shallow depth of field of my premium cinema glass, leaving her as the solitary, sharp reality in a world of illusions. And then, right as she reaches the exact midpoint of the cathedral, directly in front of my secondary camera station, Clara does something that causes the entire world to stop spinning on its axis. It is a movement so subtle, so brief, that not a single guest sitting in the wooden pews notices it. For a fraction of a single second, her gaze deviates from the front of the church, her eyes shifting away from Julian's expectant smile. She turns her head slightly to the left, looking directly into the deep, black barrel of my camera lens. She isn't looking at the matte box. She isn't looking at the expensive equipment or the red blinking recording light. She is looking straight through the glass elements, cutting through the digital sensor, and staring directly into my eyes behind the viewfinder. The radiant, practiced smile on her face falters for a microsecond, the corners of her lips dropping into a heavy, bittersweet line of absolute vulnerability and unspoken regret. It is an expression that only someone who has memorized every single shadow of her face for 10 years could possibly read. In that tiny window of time, her lips move with a faint, imperceptible breath, shaping a silent, unvoiced word that goes completely unnoticed by the audience, but is captured flawlessly in 24 high-definition frames per second onto my high-speed memory card. The exchange lasts less than a heartbeat, an invisible current of electricity passing between us through the cold metal of the camera rig, before her father gently guides her forward, and she turns her attention back to the altar. The movement leaves me completely frozen, my hands paralyzed against the leather grips of the tripod, my heart hammering a frantic, erratic rhythm against my ribs like a trapped bird. My mind is operating in overdrive, trying to process the absolute gravity of what I just saw through the viewfinder. The ceremony continues around me in a blur of motion. The priest steps up to the ornate wooden pulpit, his voice echoing through the sound system with a deep, authoritative drone, but the words are entirely meaningless to my ears. The audio monitors attached to my headphones play the crystal clear, isolated feed from the wireless microphone hidden inside Julian's lapel, capturing the low rustle of fabric and the deep, steady breathing of the groom as he reaches out to take Clara's hands. I am supposed to execute a smooth, professional pan down to capture the joining of their hands, to document the official physical sealing of their separate destinies under the watchful eyes of their families. It is a standard, fundamental shot required for every wedding video I have ever produced. But as I look through the digital display, my eyes suddenly fill with hot, heavy, silent tears that blur the edges of the frame into a chaotic mess of light and shadow. I cannot wipe them away without removing my hand from the controls and risking a sudden, noticeable jerk in the footage that would ruin the cinematic quality of the scene. I am trapped behind my own creation, forced to keep the camera steady while my own emotional foundation is systematically dismantled by the audio feeding into my ears. Because in that single, fleeting microsecond when Clara looked into my lens, I didn't just see sadness. I saw a silent, desperate call for help. The unvoiced word her lips had shaped wasn't a final, clean goodbye. It was a word that changed the entire anatomy of the day, a single syllable that shattered the narrative of the perfect wedding and revealed a dark, complex undercurrent that threatened to destroy the entire production before we could even reach the reception. The silence inside my headphones is suddenly broken by the voice of the priest, asking the congregation to bow their heads for the opening prayer. I use the moment of collective stillness to slowly step back from the camera rig, my boots making no sound on the heavy carpet as I let out a long, shuddering breath that has been trapped in my throat since the doors opened. The cathedral feels small now, the high stone ceilings pressing down on my head like an iron vice, the sweet scent of white lilies and melting candle wax becoming heavy and suffocating. I look down at my hands, watching them shake against the dark fabric of my trousers, the reality of my situation settling into my bones with the cold, absolute weight of lead. For 10 years, I had played the role of the perfect friend, the safe harbor, the man who stepped aside because he believed that true love meant prioritizing her comfort over his own desperate desires. I had convinced myself that watching her smile from a distance would be enough to sustain me through a lifetime of loneliness. But looking at her through that lens, seeing the hidden terror masking her beautiful features, I realized that my silence wasn't an act of nobility. It was an act of profound, devastating cowardice. The prayer ends, and the congregation sits down with a heavy, synchronized rustle of clothes and wooden pews, their eyes fixed on the couple standing at the front of the church. I step back up to the camera, my finger gently resting on the joystick to adjust the frame as Julian begins to speak his vows. His voice through my headphones is clear, rhythmic, and perfectly rehearsed, sounding less like a personal confession of love and more like a well-structured business contract being finalized in a boardroom. He talks about security, about the future, about the grand houses they will build and the elegant life they will curate together in the upper-class suburbs of the city. It is everything Clara's parents had ever wanted for her, the exact definition of stability that our working-class childhood could never promise. But as the camera tracks Clara's reaction, I see her fingers tightening around a bouquet until her knuckles turn a sharp, sterile white, the delicate stems of the roses snapping silently under the pressure of her grip. She isn't listening to his words. She is staring at the large golden crucifix hanging on the stone wall behind the altar, her eyes wide and glassy, looking like a prisoner watching the heavy iron gates of her cell slowly click into place. A sudden, terrifying realization begins to bloom in the corners of my mind, a thought so wild and reckless that it threatens to shatter the professional mask I have worn for years. The silent word she had whispered through the lens wasn't an accident, nor was it a random manifestation of pre-wedding nerves. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew that I would be analyzing every single frame of the footage in the editing suite later that night, that I would be zooming into her face, checking the color grading, and listening to the isolated ambient audio tracks with professional studio headphones. She was leaving a digital footprint, a hidden message in plain sight, because I was the only person in her entire life who knew how to read between the lines of her reality. She was reaching out to me through the only medium we had left, the art we had promised to create together under that leaking bus stop umbrella 10 years ago. My mind races back to the days leading up to the wedding, to the strange, fragmented phone calls she had made to my studio in the middle of the night under the pretense of checking the production schedule. She had sounded distant, her voice carrying a faint, hollow vibration that I had foolishly dismissed as simple exhaustion from the stress of planning a luxury event for 300 people. She had asked me strange, abstract questions about whether it was possible for a camera to capture something that wasn't physically there, if a recording could preserve a feeling that had already been deleted from the real world. I had given her a technical answer, talking about lighting ratios and lens compression, completely missing the desperate, underlying subtext of her words. Now, standing in the shadows of the cathedral, watching another man place his hand on her waist for the cinematic transition shot, the pieces of the puzzle violently slammed together in my head, creating a picture so alarming that my hand instinctively slips from the camera controls, causing the frame to tilt slightly upward toward the stained glass ceiling. The ceremony enters its final, definitive phase as the priest raises his hands to deliver the final blessing, the words bouncing off the stone walls with a terrifying weight of finality. I adjust the secondary camera, ensuring the wide shot is perfectly locked in as Julian leans forward to claim the traditional kiss that signifies the legal and spiritual union of their lives. The crowd erupts into a loud, synchronized wave of applause, the sound washing over my head like a violent ocean wave, but inside my headphones, the audio feed from Clara's hidden microphone captures a completely different reality. As Julian pulls away from her, his face flushed with the pride of a victor, the microphone picks up the faint, ragged sound of Clara letting out a sharp, trembling gasp, a sound that doesn't carry the joy of a new bride, but the raw, unadulterated panic of a drowning victim taking their final breath before disappearing beneath the surface. The couple turns around to face the congregation, their hands linked tightly together as they prepare to walk back down the aisle as husband and wife. The joy in the room is palpable, an expensive, curated emotion that fills the cathedral with smiles, cheers, and the throwing of white flower petals. I step into the center aisle, holding my heavy handheld stabilizer rig in front of my chest, walking backward with practiced, smooth steps to capture their recessional march in slow-motion resolution. Clara is walking straight toward me, her eyes locked onto the front element of my lens once again, her expression a flawless mask of marital bliss for the benefit of the guests lining the pews. But as she gets closer, moving within 3 feet of my station, the shallow depth of field isolates her face from the rest of the world, and I see the silent tears finally breaking through her makeup, tracing a thin, wet path down her porcelain skin. Her eyes are wide, burning with an intense, desperate silent communication that screams through the glass barrier between us, a raw, emotional signal that cuts through the noise of the applause and strikes the center of my chest like a lightning bolt. They pass by my station, the train of her white silk gown brushing against the base of my shoes, leaving behind the sweet, intoxicating scent of her favorite perfume, the same scent that had lingered on my old high school denim jacket for weeks after that rainy afternoon at the bus stop. I stand there in the middle of the clearing aisle, the heavy camera rig suddenly feeling like an impossibly massive weight pulling my shoulders down toward the stone floor. The crowd begins to pour out of the wooden pews, moving past me in a blurred wave of laughter, expensive fabrics, and congratulations, completely ignoring the solitary videographer standing frozen in the center of the church. The green recording light on my monitor continues to blink in the dimming light, a silent witness to the definitive end of the first chapter of my life, a digital record of the exact moment I watched the only girl I had ever loved walk out of my reality and into a golden cage of someone else's design. But as I look down at the digital display screen of my audio mixer, watching the green and yellow level bars bounce in response to the ambient sound of the emptying church, a cold, sharp determination begins to replace the paralyzing grief in my veins. The wedding ceremony might be officially over, the legal document signed, and the vows recorded in 24 frames per second, but the story she had whispered into my lens was only just beginning to unfold. Clara had left me a puzzle, a hidden frequency buried within the high-definition media files currently burning their data onto my studio storage drives. She had trusted me to find it, to look past the expensive white silk, the luxury cathedral, and the calculated smiles of the high society guests, and to decode the truth that she was too terrified to be yarn out loud to the world. I pack up my equipment with slow, methodical movements, locking the heavy lenses into their protective hard cases and securing the tripods with an icy, calm focus that I haven't felt in months. The raw, emotional shock that had threatened to break my sanity just an hour ago has transformed into a dangerous, calculated mission. I am no longer just a passive observer documenting an execution. I am an editor, a director, a storyteller who holds the raw, unedited footage of her truest self in the palm of his hand. I am going back to my studio tonight, and I am going to run every single line of that audio feed through the highest level of frequency isolation software. I am going to zoom into that single microsecond of footage until the individual pixels reveal the exact configuration of her thoughts. Clara had used my art to send a lifeline out from the dark, and I am going to tear through every single law of social propriety, family expectations, and legal boundaries to pull her back to the surface, no matter what the cost, and no matter how many lives we have to ruin in the process to achieve our own poetry. The silence of a professional editing studio at 3 o'clock in the morning is a heavy, artificial construct. It is not the natural quiet of a sleeping world, but a manufactured, suffocating stillness designed to isolate you entirely from reality, trapping you inside a dark room with nothing but the rhythmic hum of cooling fans, the cold glow of high-end reference monitors, and the ghosts of moments that have already passed into history. My studio is buried deep in the commercial district, away from the neon distractions of the main avenues, a solitary sanctuary of shadow where I have spent the last 6 hours sitting motionless in my ergonomic leather chair. The main lights are completely switched off, leaving the room illuminated only by the intense, cold blue and deep purple light refracting from the dual 32-inch displays sitting on my desk. On the timeline of my editing software, the entirety of Clara's wedding day stretches out before me in a complex, multi-layered matrix of colorful video tracks and jagged green audio waveforms. A digital autopsy of the exact afternoon I watched the love of my life legally surrender her future to a man who treats her like a premium corporate acquisition. My fingers, stiff from the cold air conditioning and the lingering adrenaline of the day, hover over the backlit mechanical keyboard. Every logical, professional instinct in my brain is screaming at me to close the application, to walk away from the desk, to step out into the crisp night air and let the legal boundaries of marriage dictate the terms of my reality. I am a professional. I am bound by an unwritten industry code to deliver a polished, commercial product that sanitizes the truth, a video that presents a flawless illusion of eternal happiness to the paying clients. But the technical precision of my craft has also made me an expert in detecting anomalies, in spotting the microscopic cracks in a performance that the untrained eye would pass over without a second thought. And what I saw through the viewfinder of my camera this afternoon was not a performance. It was a desperate, unscripted leak from a fracturing soul. With a slow, deliberate movement, my index finger presses the spacebar, and the playback head begins to glide smoothly across the timeline. The dual monitors instantly spring to life, rendering the high bitrate raw files from my primary cinema camera in flawless, high-definition clarity. The frame captures the exact moment the massive oak doors of the cathedral swung open, allowing a blinding torrent of pristine white sunlight to spill into the dark stone interior, silhouetting Clara's delicate figure as she prepared to make a descent down the long aisle. In the real world, that moment had passed in a blur of music, applause, and social anxiety. But here, inside the controlled vacuum of the editing suite, I have the godlike power to manipulate time itself, to slow down her movements until every single micro-expression is exposed under the digital microscope. I drag the mouse cursor backward, scrubbing through the timeline frame by frame, watching the white silk of her wedding gown retract, watching the smiles on the faces of the high society guests vanish in reverse motion, until I reach the exact temporal coordinate of the anomaly. It is the precise midpoint of her walk, the exact location where she stood directly parallel to my secondary camera station. I isolate the video track, expanding the viewing window until her face fills the entire 32-inch display, maximizing the magnification until the individual pixels threat to break apart into a mosaic of light and shadow. I hit the play button at 25% speed. The screen displays her slow-motion approach. The movement is smooth, stabilized by thousands of dollars of precision engineering, but her eyes reveal a chaotic, terrifying internal storm. I watch her gaze slide away from the altar, drifting away from Julian's polished, confident smile, and lock onto the front element of my lens. The transformation is devastating. The radiant, joyful mask she had worn for the benefit of the 300 guests vanishes in the span of a single frame, replaced by a raw, naked look of profound terror and absolute vulnerability that causes my own breath to hitch in the dark studio. And then, her lips begin to parting, shaping a word that carries no physical sound through the air of the church, a silent shape formed by her breath that lasts for exactly 3 frames of video, 1/8 of a second. I freeze the playback on the second frame, the image of her lips perfectly suspended in the middle of the unvoiced utterance. For 10 years, I have studied the patterns of her speech. I have learned the exact shape of her mouth when she is happy, when she is lying, when she is angry, and when she is too afraid to speak her thoughts out loud. I stare at the monitor, my eyes burning from the prolonged glare, my heart hammering a violent, erratic rhythm against my ribs as I analyze the geometry of her lips. It doesn't take a forensic specialist to decode it. The word isn't goodbye. The word isn't sorry. The word is run. A wave of cold, paralyzing dread washes over my chest, a sensation that feels like physical ice water being injected directly into my bloodstream. I lean back in my chair, my hand shaking so violently that I have to grip the edges of the desk to steady myself. Run. She wasn't telling herself to run. She wasn't talking to the congregation. She was looking directly into my lens, staring straight into my eyes behind the glass barrier, and she was delivering a direct, desperate command to me. But why? What could possibly be happening behind the scenes of this multi-million-dollar fairytale wedding that would cause Clara, the girl who always prioritized the happiness of her family above everything else, to look into my camera and beg me to tear her away from the altar? To find the answer, I know I have to go deeper than the visual track. The human I can be deceived by a well-choreographed performance, but audio is a ruthless, unvarnished archive of reality. When I set up the equipment for the ceremony, I had insisted on placing a high-end, military-grade wireless lavalier microphone inside the inner lining of Julian's tuxedo lapel, a microphone designed to capture his vows with absolute clarity while filtering out the ambient noise of the massive congregation. What Julian hadn't realized, and what Clara couldn't have known, is that the high-frequency capsule of that specific microphone is so sensitive that it records every single audio event within a 5-foot radius, including the faint rustle of clothing, the subtle catch of a throat, and the quiet, whispered exchanges that happen when the official microphones of the church are switched off. I move my cursor down to the audio tracks, muting the grand, sweeping frequencies of the pipe organ, silencing the heavy rumble of the congregation, and turning off the secondary ambient room microphones until the timeline is completely quiet. I isolate track 4, the raw, uncompressed feed from Julian's lapel microphone. I put on my professional studio reference headphones, pulling the thick leather cups tight against my ears to seal out the hum of the computers, and slide the master volume slider upward, boosting the gain until the underlying electronic noise floor of the recording begins to hiss in my ears like a distant ocean tide. I rewind the audio timeline by 2 minutes, placing the playback head right at the moment Clara reached the altar and her father placed her hand into Julian's. I press play. Inside my headphones, the sound of Julian's deep, rhythmic breathing fills my ears. It is steady, calm, and chillingly controlled. The breath of a man who feels absolutely no nervousness, a man who is executing a calculated transaction according to a strict timeline. Then, I hear the faint, soft rustle of silk as Clara takes her place beside him. Her breathing is the complete polar opposite of his. It is fast, shallow, and ragged, the sound of a person whose lung capacity is being systematically restricted by a profound wave of panic. The voice of the priest breaks through the static, delivering the introductory remarks of the ceremony, his tone warm and ceremonial. But beneath the booming resonance of his voice, Julian's microphone captures something else, a tiny, metallic click, followed by the faint, muffled sound of fabric moving under tension. It is a sound that shouldn't exist during a solemn religious service. I lean forward, closing my eyes, concentrating every ounce of my cognitive energy onto the auditory landscape inside my headphones. Then, during a brief pause in the priest's sermon, Julian's voice cuts through the track. He isn't speaking out loud. He is leaning his head slightly to the left, his lips moving close to Clara's ear, his voice dropping to a low, razor-sharp whisper that is completely buried beneath the natural echo of the stone cathedral in the real world, but is captured with terrifying clarity by the microphone hidden in his lapel. "Look at the front row, Clara," Julian whispers, his tone carrying an icy, dictatorial authority that makes my blood curdle in the dark studio. "Look at your father's face. See how happy he is. See how much weight has been lifted from his shoulders. Remember the documents we signed on Thursday. Remember the debt. If you take one step backward, if you make even a single scene today, the liquidation process begins before the reception is over. You play your part perfectly, or your family is on the street by Monday morning. Do you understand me?" A heavy, suffocating silence follows his whisper on the audio track, broken only by the ragged, desperate gasp of Clara trying to catch her breath. The audio is so clear that I can hear the subtle click of her jaw as she clenches her teeth, fighting down a sob that threatens to shatter her composure. "I understand," Clara whispers back, her voice carrying a hollow, dead resonance that sounds like it belongs to a ghost rather than a living, breathing woman. I slam my hand down onto the spacebar, stopping the playback instantly. The headphones feel like they are on fire, and I rip them off my head, flinging them onto the desk as I stand up from my chair, my chest heaving as if I have just run a marathon. The air inside the studio feels dangerously thin. The pieces of the puzzle that had seemed so chaotic and terrifying just a few minutes ago have suddenly locked together with the brutal, uncompromising precision of a steel trap. It wasn't a wedding. It was an execution. A high society hostage situation masquerading as a modern fairy tale romance. Clara hadn't fallen in love with an aristocratic corporate heir. She had been systematically traded by her own father to cover a catastrophic financial collapse that would have ruined her family name and sent her parents to a federal penitentiary. Julian hadn't won her heart. He had bought her reality, using his family's massive banking conglomerate to purchase her freedom, turning her into a living, breathing piece of collateral that he could display to the world like a trophy. And he had used the most vulnerable moment of her life, the walk down the aisle, to deliver a psychological death threat directly into her ear, knowing that she was too terrified of her father's ruin to fight back. I walk over to the large glass window of my studio, leaning my forehead against the cold pane as I stare out at the sleeping city skyline. The distant streetlights twinkle in the darkness like dying stars, completely indifferent to the human tragedies unfolding beneath their glare. A profound, overwhelming wave of guilt settles into my stomach, a physical sickness that causes me to close my eyes in shame. For the last 12 months, during the entirety of their high-profile courtship, I had allowed my own broken heart to dictate my actions. I had looked at Clara from a distance, seen her growing quiet and withdrawn, and I had foolishly assumed that she was simply drifting away from me, that she was outgrowing our working-class roots and choosing a life of luxury that I could never provide. I had let my own pride, my own feelings of inadequacy, blind me to the terrifying reality of what was happening to her. I had abandoned her to the wolves because my own ego was too bruised to see that she was drowning in plain sight. "You coward," I whisper into the empty room, the words fogging up the cold glass in front of me. "You absolute coward." If I had just asked her one real question, if I had just ignored the cold boundaries of social propriety and forced her to tell me the truth during those midnight phone calls to my studio, we wouldn't be standing on the edge of this abyss tonight. She had reached out to me, dropped subtle, fragmented clues into our conversations, begging her oldest friend to look past the illusion and pull her back to safety. And I had responded with technical advice about camera lenses. I turned back toward the glowing monitors, the green audio waveforms on the screen looking like a digital electrocardiogram tracking the final moments of her freedom. The wedding ceremony is over, the legal contracts are signed, and Clara is currently sitting inside a luxury hotel suite on the top floor of the city's most expensive high-rise, trapped in a golden cage with a monster who holds the financial fate of her family in his hands. By all accounts of the law and society, the story is concluded. The credits are ready to roll. But as I look at the unedited footage of her face frozen on my screen, something inside my soul shifts, a permanent, irreversible alignment of purpose that burns away the last remnants of my fear and hesitation. The world sees me as an anonymous technician, a service provider hired to document the lives of important people before fading back into the background noise of the city. They think a camera is just a passive recording device, a tool that captures reality without altering its course. But they don't understand the true power of the lens. An editor doesn't just watch the footage. An editor decides where the cut happens. An editor decides which scenes are thrown into the recycle bin and which stories are rewritten from scratch. I walk back to the desk, sliding back into my chair with a heavy, cold determination that hardens my features into an expression I have never seen in the mirror before. I pull the mechanical keyboard toward me, my fingers flying across the keys as I launch a secondary, heavily encrypted communication application on my secure network terminal. 10 years ago, on that rusty swing set in the empty playground behind our old high school, Clara had given me a small, old silver key necklace, a childhood token she had found in her grandmother's attic. She had laughed and told me that if she ever got lost in the dark, that key would be the secret code that meant I had to come find her, no matter how far away she had drifted. I had kept that key inside the bottom drawer of my studio desk for a decade, a worthless piece of metal that carried the weight of an unbreakable promise. I open the drawer, my fingers brushing past old hard drives and cables until they wrap around the cold, tarnished silver of the key. I pull it out into the light of the monitors, the ancient metal catching the purple glow of the editing software. I open a secure text channel that routes directly to her personal, private device, a secondary phone that Julian's corporate security team doesn't know exists. It is the number she used to call me from in the middle of the night when the weight of her reality became too heavy to bear alone. I don't write a long, emotional essay. I don't pour out my 10 years of unrequited love or my fury at what her father and Julian have done to her. I keep the communication down to the absolute, vital shorthand of our shared history, a direct response to the command she had delivered through my lens 3 hours ago. I type 2 words, key ready. I hit the send button, watching the progress bar track across the screen until the status changes to delivered. I put my studio reference headphones back on, sliding them over my ears with a firm, deliberate movement. I move my mouse back to the beginning of the timeline, selecting the raw, unedited footage of her walk down the aisle. I am not going to delete these files. I am not going to turn them into a beautiful, sanitized wedding video for Julian's corporate marketing department. I am going to turn this footage into a weapon, a chronological record of blackmail, coercion, and corporate warfare that will tear Julian's pristine reputation into bloody shreds if he dares to lay a single finger on her tonight. The digital clock on the corner of my monitor clicks over to 3:15 a.m. The city outside is still sleeping, completely unaware that the silent videographer sitting in the dark studio has just declared an absolute, no-holds-barred war against one of the most powerful financial empires in the country. The unedited footage on my screen is no longer a record of my heartbreak. It is the tactical blueprint for a rescue mission. And as I wait for the screen to show the typing indicator from her secure device, I know that by the time the sun rises over the city skyline on Monday morning, the poetry we promised to create under that leaking bus stop umbrella will be written in the ashes of the lives we are about to destroy. The ticking of a digital clock on an editing monitor is the most objective measurement of anxiety known to human consciousness. Inside the vacuum of my dark studio, the small green numbers on the corner of the display shift from 3:15 to 3:30, and then slowly, agonizingly, drag themselves toward 3:45 a.m. Every single second feels like a physical drop of water falling onto a hot iron plate, evaporating into nothingness but leaving behind a residue of pure, unadulterated tension. I have not moved a single muscle since I pressed the send button on my secure terminal. My eyes remain rigidly locked onto the empty chat box under the contact header that has no name, no profile picture, and no digital identity. Just a ghost line that routes through an encrypted proxy server I built 3 years ago when we both realized that the real world was becoming too small for our secrets. The tarnished silver key necklace rests directly beside my phone on the control console, its jagged, antique edges catching the faint, residual purple glow of the video editing timeline. 10 years ago, when Clara handed me that key in the middle of a deserted high school playground, it was a childish game, a romanticized coping mechanism for two working-class teenagers who felt completely powerless against the cold machinery of adult expectations. She had told me that if she ever found herself trapped in a place where she couldn't call out for help, she would send a signal, and that key would mean I had to drop everything and tear down whatever walls were keeping her hostage. I had laughed back then, treating it as a beautiful, dramatic metaphor. But tonight, as I sit in the dark listening to the cooling fans of my server racks, I realize that childhood games are often the only survival blueprints we carry into the horrors of our adult realities. The silence is suddenly shattered not by a sound, but by a sudden, violent eruption of light. The smartphone resting on the desk illuminates with a harsh, brilliant white radiance that cuts through the shadows of the room like a blade of magnesium, casting a long, distorted shadow of my own silhouette onto the acoustic foam panels of the back wall. My heart takes a massive, agonizing leap against my ribs, my throat tightening instantly until my breath catches in my chest. I lean forward, my hands gripping the edge of the desk so tightly that my knuckles turn a pasty, bloodless white. On the display, the status indicator of the secure chat channel has finally shifted. The word delivered has vanished. In its place, 3 tiny, rhythmic grey dots are dancing in a loop, the digital heartbeat of a person typing from the other side of the city. The dots vanish. Then they reappear. For 2 minutes, the system processes her hesitation, a silent testament to the terrifying risk she is taking just by holding a device in the dark. And then, the text box updates, dropping a single, solitary paragraph into the empty window that causes my entire world to lose its gravity. He's asleep in the other room. The message reads, the characters appearing on my screen with a cold, clinical precision that contrasts sharply with the raw panic of their meaning. The corporate security team is stationed at the end of the hallway outside the penthouse door. They checked my personal bags before we left the reception, but they didn't find this phone because it was sewn into the inner lining of my wedding gown's train. I extracted it 10 minutes ago. I saw your message. I knew you would look past the lens. I knew you would hear me. But you don't understand the scale of what they are doing. It isn't just a financial debt. My father didn't just borrow money from Julian's bank conglomerate. He traded the digital proprietary security architecture of the city's transit network. If I leave this room, if I break the contract, they don't just liquidate his assets. They release modified log files that make it look like my father committed corporate espionage against the state. They will destroy his life, his sanity, and send him to a maximum security prison for the rest of his natural days. I am trapped, not by walls, but by a matrix of legal documents that I cannot outrun. I read the message 3 times, my eyes burning as the cold reality of her situation solidifies in my mind. Julian wasn't just a ruthless corporate predator. He was an architectural criminal, a mastermind who had used his family's banking power to orchestrate a legal trap so absolute that it left no room for escape. He had targeted Clara's father, found the single structural weakness in his engineering firm, and created a synthetic crime, holding a man's survival hostage to force his daughter into a high society marriage that served as the ultimate merger of corporate power and social prestige. But as I stare at the text, a sudden, fierce wave of absolute defiance replaces the cold dread in my veins. Julian may understand international banking laws, he may understand corporate litigation, and he may have an entire army of security guards standing outside a luxury penthouse door. But he does not understand the raw, unedited architecture of digital data. He does not understand that in the modern world, everything, every debt, every contract, every corporate espionage file, is nothing more than a string of binary code stored on a server. And a server is a structure that can be breached, dismantled, and rewritten if you know exactly where to strike. I pull my mechanical keyboard toward me, my fingers flying across the keys with an icy, calculated focus as I initiate a secondary terminal window on my central monitor. Clara, listen to me very carefully. I type back, my voice inside my head sounding steady and absolute. A contract is only valid if the archives holding the supporting evidence remain intact. You said the documents were signed on Thursday. Where are the local servers for Julian's private banking conglomerate? Where do they store the physical data drives for the transit architecture logs? The response from the other side of the city comes almost instantly, the typing indicator appearing for mere seconds before the screen updates. They don't keep them at the main corporate headquarters, she writes. Julian is paranoid. He has a private, decentralized data vault located inside the old industrial printing factory on the Western Docks, the third warehouse next to the shipping channel. It's connected to an independent power grid, and it's completely isolated from the standard internet network to prevent remote hacking. The physical encryption key, the hard drive token that contains the master clearance bypass, is sitting inside his leather briefcase right now, less than 10 feet away from me in the master bedroom of the penthouse. It is a silver USB hardware token with a security seal. If someone could get that token to the warehouse data vault, they could delete the entire archive, including the modified logs against my father, before the corporate offices open on Monday morning. But it's an impossible suicide mission. The briefcase is armed with a localized proximity alarm, and the warehouse has armed guards. I look down at the silver key necklace resting on my console, then look back up at the monitor where the word warehouse is burning into my retina. A profound, beautiful clarity washes over my consciousness, a sensation like a blinding flash of lightning illuminating a dark landscape. The universe had spent 10 years pushing us down separate paths, forcing her into a world of wealth and isolation while trapping me in a world of technical shadows and unrequited grief. But tonight, all those separate streams have converged into a single, definitive moment of action. The art we had promised to create wasn't a movie. It wasn't a wedding video. It was a heist. It was an act of absolute, poetic sabotage designed to rewrite our destinies in the ashes of Julian's empire. Get the token. I type into the chat box, my hand completely steady now, my heart beating with the cold, rhythmic precision of a war drum. Clara, you need to extract that hardware key from his briefcase. I don't care about the proximity alarm. You have exactly 30 minutes before the shift change of the security guards at the hotel. I am leaving my studio right now. I am driving to the Western Docks. By the time you get the token out of that building, I will be waiting at the extraction point. Trust the melody we built under the bus stop. We are editing the final cut of this story tonight. I don't wait for her to reply. I don't wait for her to tell me that I am insane or that the risks are too high. I slam the terminal screen shut, pulling my heavy studio headphones from my neck and tossing them onto the editing console. The raw, unedited footage of her wedding ceremony remains frozen on my primary monitor, her beautiful, tear-stained face staring out into the empty room like a silent blessing. I walk over to the equipment rack, grabbing a high-powered digital interface toolkit, an encrypted network bridge device, and a specialized field laptop used for remote data rendering. I pack them into a durable tactical backpack, pulling the straps tight against my shoulders until the weight feels secure. I walk over to the small drawer where I keep my personal belongings, reaching past old lens caps and receipts until my fingers wrap around the old silver key necklace. I loop the chain around my neck, hiding the cold metal beneath the collar of my dark denim jacket. It is no longer a token of childhood nostalgia. It is a physical talisman of a blood oath, a reminder that for 10 years I have loved a girl in absolute silence, and that tonight, that silence is going to express itself in a language that Julian's empire will never forget. I step out of the studio, locking the heavy metal door behind me with a sharp, definitive click that echoes through the empty commercial corridor. The air outside is crisp, smelling of wet asphalt and ozone from the midnight storm that had washed over the city hours ago. The streets are completely deserted, a labyrinth of dark concrete and blinking amber traffic lights that look like a city waiting for an execution. I climb into my old, battered utility van, throwing my backpack onto the passenger seat and cranking the engine to life. The motor roars in the quiet alleyway, a low, mechanical growl that matches the dangerous, calculated fury building inside my own chest. As I pull out onto the main avenue, pushing the vehicle through the dark streets toward the western edge of the metropolis, my eyes remain fixed on the digital clock on the dashboard. 4 a.m. The countdown has officially begun. Across the city, inside a luxury glass cage overlooking the world, a girl in a white silk dress is currently standing over a sleeping monster, her fingers reaching for a security briefcase that holds the leverage of her entire life. She is taking a step into the absolute darkness because I told her to trust me, because for 10 years, I was the only person who never lied to her. The distance between my van and the industrial printing factory on the docks is decreasing with every passing minute. The massive metal cranes of the shipping channels silhouette against the pale, purple-grey light of the approaching dawn like giant prehistoric beasts waiting for a storm. I know that if I fail tonight, if the armed guards at the data vault catch me with the network tools, or if Clara is discovered extracting the token from the penthouse, our lives are effectively over. We will be crushed by the immense, unfeeling weight of corporate litigation, financial ruin, and criminal prosecution. The world will look at our story and see nothing more than a pathetic, reckless act of desperation by a disgruntled working-class videographer who couldn't let go of his high school sweetheart. But as I press my foot harder against the accelerator, forcing the vehicle to its absolute mechanical limits, a wild, dangerous smile cuts through the shadows of my face. Let them look. Let them record it. Let them archive every single piece of our ruin. Because tonight, we are not playing by their rules anymore. We are running our own unedited footage, cutting out the threats, deleting the debts, and forcing the universe to accept the poetry we promised to build under that leaking bus stop umbrella 10 years ago. And if we have to burn down the entire city's financial sector just to give her a single day of true freedom, then I will gladly be the man who holds the match, standing behind the lens as the world burns around us in 24 frames per second. The heavy, moisture-laden fog of the western docks rolls across the cracked concrete of the shipping channels like a silent, ghostly shroud, dampening the low, mechanical growl of my utility van as I kill the headlights and coast into the deep shadows of an abandoned crane assembly. The air out here smells heavily of rusted iron, stale salt water, and chemical diesel, a cold, industrial wasteland that sits on the extreme geographic fringe of the metropolis, entirely isolated from the glittering wealth of the high-rise district where Clara is currently fighting for her sanity. I sit in the driver's seat for a fraction of a second, the steering wheel cold beneath my calloused palms, my eyes tracking the perimeter of the third warehouse down the channel. The structure is a massive, decaying monument to pre-automation printing technology, its corrugated iron facade rusted into deep shades of orange and brown, looking completely dead from the outside. But I can see the thick, heavily insulated commercial power conduits cutting directly through the concrete foundation, humming with a faint, high-voltage vibration that tells a completely different story. This is the place. This is Julian's digital vault, a private, disconnected fortress of binary manipulation where a family's ruin has been meticulously archived on solid-state platters. I grabbed the tactical backpack from the passenger seat, checking the heavy nylon straps one last time before stepping out into the freezing pre-dawn air. The cold strikes my face like a physical slap, cutting through the layers of my dark denim jacket, but the internal temperature of my body is white-hot, driven by a dangerous, concentrated rush of pure adrenaline that has completely overwritten my capacity for fear. I slip around the back of the van, moving with the practiced, silent fluidity of a shadow, my boots making absolutely no sound on the wet, weed-choked asphalt. The old silver key necklace bounces softly against my collarbone under my shirt, its cold metallic weight acting as a physical anchor, a constant, tactile reminder of the promise that brought me to the edge of this criminal abyss tonight. Reaching the perimeter fence of the warehouse, I locate a small, jagged breach in the rusted chain-link mesh where the steel had corroded away over decades of exposure to the salt air. I slide my backpack through the narrow gap, following it with a slow, careful compression of my shoulders, the sharp metal barbs grazing the fabric of my jacket with a soft, tearing sound that makes my teeth clench in the darkness. Once inside the perimeter, I drop to one knee behind a stack of rotted wooden shipping pallets, my eyes scanning the high, narrow windows of the warehouse structure. There are no security guards visible on the external catwalks, but I know from the technical layout Clara described that Julian doesn't rely on basic physical patrols to protect his most volatile assets. The entire interior is governed by localized, closed-circuit proximity sensors and hardwired digital tripwires that operate entirely independently of the public grid. To breach this structure without triggering an immediate, automated data purge sequence, I don't just need to get through the door. I need to find the specific junction box where the external network bridge lines enter the main server room. I pull my smartphone from my pocket, checking the encrypted chat interface with a quick, nervous swipe of my thumb. The screen is a brilliant, blinding square of light against the deep shadows of the industrial yard. The chat box is empty. The 3 dancing grey dots that signify her voice have vanished, leaving behind nothing but the cold, sterile timestamp of our last exchange. My chest tightens with a familiar, suffocating panic. Across the city, inside the luxury penthouse suite on the 30th floor of the Grand Imperial Hotel, the countdown is currently running out. Clara is standing inside a room that cost more than my entire studio setup, her fingers reaching into the dark to extract a hardware security token from a briefcase that is wired to alert Julian's personal protection detail the moment the latch mechanisms deviate by a single millimeter. She is playing an active part in a high-stakes psychological game where a single misstep means immediate social and legal execution. My mind flashes back to the editing suite 3 hours ago, to the uncompressed, isolated audio track of Julian's voice whispering threats into her ear at the altar. You play your part perfectly, or your family is on the street by Monday morning. The cold, aristocratic arrogance of his words echoes through the empty chambers of my mind, transforming my lingering anxiety into a sharp, lethal determination. Julian thinks he has calculated every single variable. He thinks his wealth, his lawyers, and his security systems have made him completely untouchable by the common world. He treats human lives like numbers on a balance sheet, adjusting the margins to maximize his power while destroying anyone who dares to stand in the way of his corporate trajectory. But tonight, He made the fatal, catastrophic mistake of leaving his digital footprint inside my domain. He forgot that a videographer isn't just an observer. An editor is a master of timing, a person who knows exactly how to cut a scene to alter the entire trajectory of the narrative. I move out from behind the shipping pallets, staying low to the ground as I track the thick bundles of electrical conduits along the northern wall of the warehouse. I find the external service portal, a heavy, reinforced iron door secured by a mechanical commercial deadbolt and a secondary digital keypad that glows with a faint, menacing red LED indicator. I drop my backpack onto the concrete floor, unzipping the main compartment to reveal the high-powered digital interface toolkit and the network bridge device I extracted from my studio. My hands are completely steady now, moving with a cold, mechanical precision that feels entirely disconnected from my emotional reality. I connect a flat, flexible ribbon cable from the interface toolkit directly into the maintenance port at the base of the digital keypad, my field laptop booting up in the darkness with a low, blue radiance that illuminates the dust motes floating in the heavy dock fog. The brute force decryption script begins to run on the terminal screen, the lines of code cascading down the display in a green waterfall of binary algorithms. The system is scanning thousands of cryptographic combinations per second, trying to find the single digital vulnerability that will override the magnetic lock mechanisms of the iron door. The progress bar tracks across the screen with agonizing slowness, 10%, 20%, 30%. Every second that ticks by is a second where Clara could be discovered, a second where Julian could wake up from his expensive, alcohol-induced sleep and find his new bride standing over his security briefcase with treason in her eyes. I stare at the display, my teeth grinding together until my jaw aches, the low hum of the warehouse power grid vibrating through the soles of my boots like a distant, approaching thunderstorm. Suddenly, a sharp, metallic click echoes through the quiet industrial yard, followed instantly by the digital keypad's LED indicator shifting from a menacing red to a vibrant, electric green. The heavy iron door pops open by a fraction of an inch, the pressurized seal breaking with a low, hissing sound that smells of old grease and static electricity. I disconnect the cable with a single, rapid jerk of my hand, throwing the laptop and the tools back into my tactical backpack before grabbing the iron handle and pulling the door open just wide enough to allow my body to slip through into the pitch-black interior of the structure. The interior of the warehouse is an immense, cavernous void of absolute shadow, the air stagnant and cold, carrying the faint, sweet scent of vintage printing inks and old paper. But as I step further into the space, navigating the narrow paths between massive, abandoned printing presses that look like iron monsters sleeping in the dark, I see a structure that doesn't belong in this historical ruin. At the far end of the warehouse floor, enclosed within a massive, modern cage of reinforced frosted glass and structural steel, sits the decentralized server vault. The room is brilliantly illuminated from within by the cold, sterile blue light of dozens of enterprise server racks, their internal status lights blinking in a chaotic, synchronized pattern that looks like the nervous system of a digital beast. The low, deafening roar of cooling fans fills the cavernous space, creating a constant, white noise roar that completely drowns out the sound of my footsteps as I approach the glass perimeter. This is the heart of Julian's leverage. Inside those blinking server blades are the modified log files, the synthetic electronic evidence that frames Clara's father for corporate espionage against the state. It is a masterpiece of digital assassination, a financial and legal trap so perfectly constructed that no traditional lawyer could ever dismantle it. But as I open my backpack and pull out the secure network bridge device, I know that I am not here to argue with his lawyers. I am here to delete the archive. I connect the network bridge directly into the primary external data terminal on the side of the glass enclosure, my field laptop interface mapping out the network architecture of the vault within seconds. The security architecture is immense, a multi-layered fortress of firewalls and intrusion detection systems that instantly block my access the moment I attempt to initiate a standard administrative bypass. The screen flashes with a massive, crimson warning box, critical security notice, master hardware security token required for access. I check my phone once again, my fingers slick with cold sweat as I switch back to the encrypted chat application. The time is 4:45 a.m. The shift change for the hotel security detail happens at 5 a.m. If Clara doesn't send the clearance code or extract the hardware token within the next 15 minutes, the security net will close around her, and my terminal here will remain a useless window looking into an unreachable fortress. "Come on, Clara," I whisper into the dark, my voice cracking from the intense pressure building inside my throat. "Come on." As if in direct response to my prayer, the smartphone screen in my hand suddenly erupts into a violent, brilliant flash of white light. The chat interface updates with a massive, multi-megabyte encrypted data file, followed instantly by a short, frantic block of text that causes my heart to stop entirely. I have it. The message reads, the characters appearing on the screen like fragments of a bomb blast. I got the silver hardware token out of the briefcase, but the latch mechanism was connected to a localized weight sensor that I didn't see in the dark. The proximity alarm didn't sound in the room, but the internal status light on the case turned red. The security office downstairs has been alerted. I can hear the elevators moving toward the penthouse floor right now. I am running toward the service stairs at the back of the building. Julian is still asleep, but they will check the room in less than 2 minutes. The clearance key data is embedded in the file I just sent you. Plug it into your terminal now. Delete everything. Don't wait for me. A cold, lethal adrenaline completely replaces the panic in my system. My mind shifts into a state of absolute, hyper-focus calculation. I don't waste time typing a reply. I don't waste seconds telling her to be careful. I slam the smartphone down onto the concrete floor, grabbing the interface cable from my laptop and hot-wiring my field device directly into the network bridge. I extract the cryptographic clearance data from the file she sent, routing the synthetic hardware signature straight into the server vault's primary firewall terminal. The effect is instantaneous. The crimson warning box on my monitor shatters into 1,000,000 digital pieces, replaced by a deep, beautiful emerald green text layout that reads, "Access granted, administrative level 0 clearance conferred." The entire architecture of Julian's digital vault is laid bare before me, a complex directory of secure folders, encrypted document archives, and the critical transit network log files that held Clara's family hostage. My fingers dance across the mechanical keyboard with a terrifying speed, initiating a massive, low-level military-grade deletion sequence that targets the absolute core sectors of the server drives. This isn't a standard file deletion. This is an algorithmic scrub, a process that overwrites every single sector of the solid-state storage with random binary noise, ensuring that not even a forensic specialist from the government could ever recover a single line of the original data. On the screen, a massive progress circle begins to fill with green light, tracking the systematic destruction of Julian's leverage. Deleting file sector 01. Deleting file sector 02. Deleting file sector 03. The cooling fans of the server racks behind the frosted glass suddenly accelerate, their pitch rising to a high, screaming whine as the processors work at maximum capacity to execute the permanent purge of the system archives. But as I watch the progress bar reach 40%, a sudden, blinding flash of white light hits the back of my head from the entrance of the warehouse, followed instantly by the deafening, echoing screech of heavy metal doors being violently thrown open against the concrete walls. The sound reverberates through the cavernous space like a gunshot, shattering the white noise of the cooling fans and causing my entire body to lock into a rigid stance of absolute defense. I turn my head toward the far end of the warehouse floor, my eyes straining against the darkness. Through the thick, rolling dock fog that has drifted inside the structure, I can see the sharp, cutting beams of 3 high-powered tactical flashlights slicing through the shadows like laser lines. The beams are moving rapidly toward my position, bouncing erratically against the old printing presses as the heavy, rhythmic thud of combat boots echoes across the concrete floor. Security. Stay where you are. Do not move. A deep, authoritative voice commands from the darkness, the words distorted by the natural echo of the massive warehouse architecture. Julian's private security team hadn't just checked the hotel. They had mapped out the network traffic of the decentralized vault the moment the weight sensor on the briefcase was compromised, and they had dispatched a tactical unit to the docks to secure the physical data drives before the purge could be completed. I look back at my laptop monitor, my eyes wide with a frantic, animalistic desperation. The progress bar is currently sitting at 55%. Overriding archive log 04. Overriding archive log 05. The deletion sequence needs exactly 90 seconds to reach the absolute point of no return. 90 seconds before the leverage against Clara's father is erased from existence forever. If I pull the laptop now, if I disconnect the network bridge to save myself, the sequence will abort, the firewalls will instantly re-engage, and Julian will retain the power to destroy her life before the sun can rise over the city. I look down at the silver key necklace hanging from my neck, its old metal warm against my skin, carrying the entire weight of a 10-year-old promise made under a leaking bus stop roof. I spent a decade running away from my own feelings, playing the role of the perfect, silent martyr while the world took away the only girl I had ever loved. I am not running tonight. I am not stepping away from the lens. I reach down into my tactical backpack, my hand wrapping around a heavy, solid steel manual camera stabilizer arm, a heavy, 2-foot bar of solid industrial metal used for steadying heavy cinema rigs. I pull it out into the light of the monitors, the steel catching the emerald glow of the deletion screen as I stand up from my chair and step away from the laptop, placing my body directly between the tactical team and the data terminal. 60 seconds. I whisper into the screaming roar of the server fans, my fingers tightening around the metal bar until my knuckles turn a pasty, bloodless white. Just give me 60 seconds. The flashlights cut through the final line of old printing presses, the brilliant, blinding beams hitting my eyes with a crushing intensity that forces me to squint through the glare. 3 tall, heavily built men in dark tactical uniforms step into the light of the server enclosure, their faces obscured by ballistic masks, their hands reaching for the non-lethal compliance weapons resting on their utility belts. They don't see a criminal mastermind. They don't see a professional hacker. They see a solitary, desperate content creator standing in the dark with a camera part in his hand, trying to fight a multi-billion-dollar corporate empire with nothing but poetry and unrequited devotion. The lead security guard steps forward, his flashlight beam locked onto the center of my chest as he raises an industrial-grade stun compliance weapon. Step away from the console now, kid, he sneers, his voice carrying the cold, indifferent authority of a system that has never been successfully challenged by the working class. You're playing a game you can't afford to lose. I look past his shoulder, out toward the high windows of the warehouse where the first, bleeding orange light of the Monday morning dawn is finally beginning to cut through the dock fog. The first video I ever uploaded to the channel had a caption about how light always finds a way to break through the deepest shadows if you just hold the exposure long enough. Tonight, I am going to hold the exposure until the entire world catches fire. Behind me, the laptop let out a sharp, high-pitched electronic chime, a sound that carries the absolute, definitive finality of a judge's gavel hitting the mahogany block. I glance down at the display out of the corner of my eye. The progress bar has vanished. In its place, a massive, screen-filling layout of emerald green characters is flashing in a loop. Deletion complete. Network archive destroyed. System offline. A wild, dangerous laugh breaks through my throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated triumph that echoes through the cavernous warehouse like a declaration of war. I look back at the tactical team, raising the steel stabilizer bar in front of my chest as the lead guard takes his final step toward my station. The file is deleted, I say, my voice steady, calm, and filled with a lethal satisfaction that causes the guard to hesitate for a microsecond. The unedited footage is gone. Now, let's see how much your boss is willing to pay to clean up the mess we are about to make. Before the guard can pull the trigger, I plunge the warehouse into absolute darkness by smashing the main power cable of the interface terminal with my boot, and the first physical clash of our war begins in the blind shadows of the western docks, while across the city, the sound of police sirens begins to echo through the streets around Clara's escape route, signaling that the first chapter of our survival is officially over and the real hunt has begun. The physical architecture of wealth is designed to prevent a clean exit. Inside the Grand Imperial Hotel, every surface is polished to a mirror sheen, reflecting the suffocating illusion of safety while systematically funneling your movements through monitored choke points, biometric elevators, and carpeted corridors where every single square inch is mapped by high-definition security cameras. But a building, no matter how luxurious, is ultimately just an engineering problem. And when you are running for your life, the soft, expensive illusions of high society disintegrate, leaving behind nothing but the cold, raw concrete of structural survival. My lungs are burning with an intensity that feels like liquid fire, the cold air of the emergency stairwell tearing at my throat with every desperate breath I take. The white silk of my wedding gown, the multi-thousand-dollar garment that had felt like a ceremonial shroud just 12 hours ago, is now a mutilated, functional asset. 10 minutes ago, standing in the dark luxury penthouse while Julian's heavy, rhythmic breathing filled the master bedroom, I had used a pair of heavy styling scissors to systematically rip away the heavy, 6-foot train of the dress, shredding the expensive lace until the skirt was short enough to allow my legs to move without restriction. The secure, nameless smartphone is clutched so tightly in my right palm that the plastic casing is digging into my skin, its screen completely dark to avoid casting an accidental silhouette against the stark, grey concrete walls of the stairwell. I can hear them above me. The heavy, syncopated thud of tactical combat boots is echoing down from the 30th floor, a metallic, rhythmic vibration that travels through the steel handrails and penetrates directly into the bones of my arms. Check the western fire exit. A voice booms from 3 flights up, the tone sharp, clinical, and completely devoid of human empathy. Julian's security team isn't calling the police. They aren't going to raise a public alarm that would compromise the delicate stock values of his family's banking conglomerate. They are executing an internal retrieval protocol, treating me like a piece of high-value corporate intellectual property that has wandered off the balance sheet in the middle of the night. I descend the stairs faster, my satin wedding shoes slipping dangerously on the cold, unpolished concrete steps. I grab the iron railing with my left hand to stabilize my weight, the friction burning my palm as I swing my body around the landing of the 24th floor. Every flight of stairs feels identical, a repetitive, dizzying loop of grey walls, emergency exit signs glowing with a malevolent red radiance, and the terrifying knowledge that the distance between my body and the street is shrinking far too slowly. My mind flashes back to the final message I received from the dark studio before the network went completely dead. Trust the melody we built under the bus stop. We are editing the final cut of this story tonight. Those 2 lines are the only physical currency I have left in this world. For 3 years, I had allowed myself to believe that the silence between us was an absolute boundary, a permanent admission that our childhood promises had been liquidated by the harsh reality of my father's financial collapse. I had looked at the cold, unfeeling architecture of Julian's world and convinced myself that my survival depended on my absolute submission. But tonight, when I looked through the front element of that cinema lens at the altar, I didn't see an anonymous service provider documenting my execution. I saw the boy who used to sit with me on a rusty swing set at midnight, counting the stars because the real world was too terrifying to face. I saw the only person who ever truly looked at me without a contract in his hand. Suddenly, a loud, mechanical click echoes from the landing directly below me, followed by the heavy creak of a fire door being violently thrown open on the 22nd floor. The beam of a high-powered tactical flashlight cuts through the darkness of the stairwell, its sharp, white light splashing across the concrete steps just 10 feet away from my feet. She's here. I've got visual confirmation on the 23rd floor landing. A guard shouts, his voice dangerously close. Panic, cold and sharp, paralyzes my throat. I look back up the stairs. The pursuit from above is closing in. I look down. The path to the street is officially blocked. The system has closed the trap. I am suspended in the middle of a concrete vacuum, 23 stories above the ground, with no options left on the editing timeline. Without thinking, my fingers slide across the side of the secure smartphone, activating the secondary network bypass switch. The screen springs to life, displaying a small, real-time map interface with a solitary, blinking blue dot that represents my current location. I press the emergency transit button, sending a single, high-frequency data burst through the encrypted proxy network, a digital scream into the dark that carries nothing but my exact geographic coordinates and a 2-word status update: trap closed. Across the city, the glass of the third warehouse window shatters into a million glittering, razor-sharp diamonds as my body crashes through the frame, tumbling violently onto the wet, weed-choked concrete of the western docks. The impact knocks the wind completely out of my chest, a dull, agonizing ache exploding across my ribs as I roll over the hard asphalt, my hands automatically tightening around the straps of my tactical backpack to protect the field laptop inside. "Stop him. Don't let him reach the vehicle." A voice screams from inside the dark warehouse, followed instantly by the sharp, electric pop of a stun compliance weapon discharging into the air, the blue arc of high-voltage current missing my shoulder by a fraction of an inch. I scramble to my feet, ignoring the warm sensation of blood trickling down my lower lip where a piece of flying glass had grazed my skin. My dark denim jacket is torn at the elbow, and my muscles are screaming in protest, but the primal instinct for survival has taken absolute control of my motor functions. I sprint toward the deep shadows of the crane assembly where my utility van is parked, my boots splashing through the shallow puddles of rainwater that reflect the pale, bleeding orange light of the Monday morning dawn. Behind me, the tactical flashlights are cutting through the thick dock fog, their beams tracking my movement across the industrial yard like searchlights in a prison camp. I reach the driver's side door of the van, ripping it open with a single, violent motion and throwing myself into the seat. My fingers are shaking with a terrifying cocktail of adrenaline and exhaustion as I jam the ignition key into the slot, twisting it with everything I have. The old internal combustion engine coughs, sputtering for a fraction of a second against the cold moisture of the docks, before roaring to life with a loud, mechanical growl that shatters the silence of the waterfront. I slam my foot down onto the clutch, jamming the gear selector into reverse as the first security guard emerges from the fog, his hand reaching for the driver's side door handle. I release the clutch and stomp on the accelerator. The rear tires spin violently on the wet asphalt, emitting a sharp, screaming screech of burning rubber as the van launches backward into the darkness, the front bumper clipping a rusted iron oil drum and sending it crashing across the yard. The guard is forced to dive out of the way to avoid being crushed beneath the heavy utility tires. I swing the steering wheel around, shifting into first gear with a brutal, grinding crunch of the transmission, and accelerate out of the industrial yard, leaving the flashing lights and the ruined data vault behind me in a cloud of exhaust smoke. As the vehicle barrels onto the main commercial avenue, heading east toward the high-rise district at 90 miles per hour, the smartphone resting on the passenger seat suddenly illuminates with a harsh, violent frequency. A sharp, high-pitched electronic chime pierces through the roar of the engine, the specific notification sound reserved for the secure proxy channel. I glance down at the display out of the corner of my eye while keeping my hands locked onto the vibrating steering wheel. The screen shows a digital map of the city, and right in the center of the high-rise sector, a bright crimson alert box is flashing over her contact profile. Trap closed. Geographic coordinate: Grand Imperial Hotel, 22nd floor fire isolation zone. No, I mutter through my clenched teeth, my fingers tightening around the steering wheel until the leather wrap begins to groan under the pressure. No, Clara, hold on. The math is simple, and it is absolutely terrifying. The Grand Imperial Hotel is exactly 4 miles away from my current position. At my current speed, bypassing every traffic restriction in the city, I need exactly 4 minutes to reach the perimeter. But a tactical security team closing in from both sides of a concrete stairwell needs less than 60 seconds to neutralize a target. If I drive through the front entrance, Julian's security net will see my vehicle coming from a mile away. They will lock down the underground parking structures, deactivate the public elevators, and intercept me before I can even cross the marble lobby. I need to change the geometry of the scene. I need to find a blind spot in their architecture, a place where their cameras and their tactical guards cannot reach because they are looking in the wrong direction. As I push the utility van through a blinking amber traffic light, my eyes track the high-voltage electrical towers that line the elevated railway tracks running parallel to the avenue. The railway tracks cut directly through the commercial district, passing exactly 70 feet away from the western facade of the Grand Imperial Hotel's luxury parking podium. It is a piece of old city infrastructure that sits completely outside the hotel's private security perimeter, a public transit corridor that is completely unmonitored by Julian's private forces. I turn the steering wheel sharply to the left, forcing the van up the steep, concrete maintenance ramp that leads to the elevated railway maintenance platform. The tires bounce violently over the iron tracks, the suspension groaning as the vehicle positions itself on the high platform, overlooking the massive, multi-tiered concrete structure of the hotel's parking garage below. From this vantage point, 70 feet above the street level, I can see the entire western side of the high-rise. The building is a monolith of glass and concrete, but halfway down the structure, on the 22nd floor, a row of narrow, rectangular ventilation windows cuts through the concrete exterior, the mechanical exhaust portals for the emergency stairwells. I grab my tactical backpack from the passenger seat, pulling the heavy straps over my shoulders as I step out of the van onto the elevated tracks. The wind-up here is fierce, carrying the cold, biting chill of the morning sky, but my eyes are locked onto those ventilation windows. I reach into the back of the utility van, pulling out a high-tensile, industrial steel cable rig, a professional field tool used for securing heavy cinema cranes to structural beams during high-wind outdoor shoots. The cable is rated for 3,000 pounds of tension, equipped with a mechanized pneumatic launcher that can drive a titanium anchor hook deep into solid masonry from a distance of 100 feet. I hoist the pneumatic launcher onto my right shoulder, aligning the optical sight with the concrete frame of the 22nd floor ventilation window. My breathing slows down, matching the rhythm of the wind, my mind stripping away the noise of the city, the pain in my ribs, and the terrifying knowledge of what will happen if my calculations are off by a single millimeter. An editor decides where the cut happens. I whisper into the cold morning air, my finger tightening around the heavy steel trigger of the launcher. And I am cutting you out of that building tonight. I pull the trigger. A loud, explosive boom echoes across the elevated railway as the pneumatic mechanism discharges, sending the titanium anchor hook launching into the dark space between the tracks and the high-rise like a silver streak of lightning. The high-tensile steel cable uncoils from the drum at a terrifying speed, whistling through the air until the anchor hits the concrete frame of the ventilation window with a sharp, crushing impact that sends a shower of stone dust falling into the street below. The titanium barbs engage, locking themselves deep into the structural masonry with an unbreakable, mechanical grip. I connect the opposite end of the cable to the heavy iron chassis of the railway maintenance crane on the platform, pulling the manual lever until the steel line stretches taut across the empty space, a single, vibrating line of absolute defiance connecting my reality to her prison. I grab the high-speed mechanical climbing pulley from my toolkit, clipping the heavy steel carabiner directly onto the taut cable line. I don't check the knots. I don't verify the safety margins. I look across the 70-foot void at the dark window where Clara is fighting for her life, my fingers wrapping around the rubber grips of the pulley mechanism. I am coming, Clara, I say to the empty air, and with a single, definitive push of my boots against the concrete edge of the railway platform, I launch my body out into the open sky, zip-lining through the dark space between the worlds at a terrifying speed, while below us, the city begins to wake up under a bleeding orange dawn that is about to witness the most reckless rescue mission in its history. The sensation of absolute weightlessness is not a peaceful experience. It is a violent, terrifying suspension of reality where the wind becomes a physical barrier, roaring past your ears like a broken jet engine and tearing at the fabric of your clothes until your skin stings under the pressure. As my boots leave the concrete edge of the elevated railway platform, the 70-foot drop to the asphalt street below disappears from my conscious mind, replaced entirely by the rapid, terrifying magnification of the Grand Imperial Hotel's western concrete facade. The high-tensile steel cable hums a sharp, vibrating frequency against the mechanical climbing pulley in my grip, a high-pitched, metallic scream that matches the frantic rhythm of the adrenaline pulsing through my veins. The sky behind me is a bleeding tapestry of violent orange, deep lavender, and cold, morning grey, but my world is contracted into a single, narrow rectangular target, the concrete frame of the 22nd floor ventilation window. Time, the fluid matrix I have spent 10 years manipulating behind an editing console, behaves differently when your life is hanging from an industrial wire. It stretches out, expanding every microsecond until I can see individual fractures in the concrete foundation ahead of me, the way the pale dawn light catches the dust motes drifting outside the glass, and the terrifying speed at which the wall is rushing forward to meet my impact. If my alignment is off by even a fraction of an inch, if the titanium anchor hook slips from its mooring under the sudden acceleration of my weight, there will be no second take. There will be no digital undo function to restore the timeline. I will simply be a statistical anomaly wiped away from the pavement before the morning commute begins. I pull my knees up toward my chest, tucking my head into the collar of my dark denim jacket as the concrete frame fills my entire field of vision. The collision is a sudden, apocalyptic eruption of noise and physical trauma. The structural glass of the ventilation window does not simply break. It explodes inward with a deafening, crystalline roar that sounds like a continuous lightning strike inside a sealed vault. Thousands of razor-sharp shards of reinforced glass disintegrate into a glittering cloud of lethal diamonds, slicing through the heavy fog and showering the interior concrete, landing in a violent torrent of debris. The momentum of my swing carries my body straight through the shattered frame, my shoulder hitting the hard concrete floor with a bone-crushing impact that sends me rolling violently across the narrow landing, my tactical backpack absorbing the worst of the friction against the unpolished stone. I slide into the opposite wall, the breath violently driven from my lungs in a short, ragged gasp. For 3 seconds, the world is nothing but a spinning vortex of grey dust, the sharp smell of ozone, and the intense, localized throbbing pain in my left shoulder. I lie flat on my back, the shards of glass crunching beneath my denim jacket as I fight to force air back into my collapsed chest. The wind from the open sky howls through the ruined window frame behind me, carrying the distant, muted sounds of the waking city below. Hey! What the hell was that explosion? A voice screams from the flight of stairs directly above me. The sound of heavy combat boots instantly accelerates, the tactical guards on the 23rd floor abandoning their systematic search to sprint down toward the source of the structural breach. I ignore the pain in my body, forcing my muscles to contract as I scramble up from the glass-covered floor, dropping to one knee while my right hand automatically reaches down into the open compartment of my backpack to wrap around the solid steel manual camera stabilizer bar. The cold, industrial weight of the metal feels real, a solid weapon of absolute defiance in a world built on synthetic corporate leverage. I raise my head, shaking the grey concrete dust from my hair, and look across the narrow, dimly lit landing of the 22nd floor. And there she stands. Clara is frozen halfway down the next flight of stairs, her delicate hands gripping the iron railing so tightly that her fingers look translucent under the harsh red glare of the emergency exit sign. The white silk of her wedding gown is torn, the bottom edge shredded into ragged, uneven strips that reveal her scratched ankles, and her long dark hair is a chaotic, beautiful mess around her pale shoulders. Her chest is heaving with a frantic, desperate rhythm, but it is her eyes that stop my heart completely. They are wide, brilliant, and swimming with a deep, overwhelming wave of absolute disbelief, the look of a person who has spent years staring into a dark abyss, only to watch the abyss violently shatter open to reveal a ghost from her forgotten past. For 3 long years, we had lived our lives in the margins of separate realities, communicating through the safe, sterile medium of digital technology, letting our true thoughts hide behind the formal boundaries of social propriety. I had watched her from a distance through the cold glass of my camera lenses, documenting her integration into Julian's high society empire while my own soul slowly withered into silence. But tonight, as the smoke and glass dust settle around us in the suffocating quiet of the fire stairwell, the distance between 2026 and our childhood promises evaporates into nothingness. There are no corporate contracts here. There are no banking oligarchs. There is only a boy with blood on his lip and a girl in a ruined dress, standing together in the ruins of a broken system. "You're late," Clara whispers, her voice cracking under the weight of a sudden, tearful laugh that cuts through the industrial quiet of the stairwell like the most beautiful melody we ever engineered under that leaking bus stop umbrella. The rendering process took longer than expected. I respond, a wild, dangerous smile cutting through the shadows of my face as I stand up to my full height, stepping over the piles of shattered glass to bridge the final physical distance between us. I reach out my right hand, my fingers open, offering her the same unwritten contract of absolute survival we signed on that rusty swing set 10 years ago. She doesn't hesitate. She takes 3 rapid, descending steps down the stairs and launches her body into my space, her hands slamming into mine with a fierce, desperate grip that sends a jolt of pure electricity through my chest. Her fingers are freezing, trembling from the sheer terror of her escape, but her hold is absolute, an unbreakable anchor that instantly solidifies my purpose in the dark. "I have the token," she says rapidly, her breath hot against my neck as she pulls her body close to mine for a fraction of a second, her left hand reaching into the inner lining of her dress to reveal the silver USB hardware key, its surface catching the red glow of the emergency light. But Julian's guards, they are right behind me. They know I took it. "It doesn't matter anymore," I say, my voice dropping to a low, razor-sharp register of absolute certainty as I pull her behind my left shoulder, positioning my body as a physical shield between her and the upper flights of stairs. "The warehouse vault is gone, Clara." I executed a military-grade permanent wipe of the central arrays before the tactical team could cut the line. "The modified logs against your father, the corporate espionage files, the fake debt records, every single piece of leverage Julian held over your family has been reduced to random binary noise. He has nothing left but empty folders." Clara's eyes widen, a profound, breathless gasp escaping her lips as the true scale of what I have done sinks into her consciousness. The golden cage that had restricted her reality for 12 months hasn't just been unlocked. I have systematically detonated the entire foundation of the prison while she was running down the stairs. The beautiful clarity of the moment is violently shattered by the sudden, blinding glare of multiple tactical flashlights cascading down from the 23rd floor landing above us. The sharp, white beams slice through the dust and smoke of the stairwell, hitting our eyes with a crushing intensity that forces us to shield our faces. Target identified on the 22nd floor landing. "She's with the intruder from the docks," the lead guard shouts, his voice carrying the cold, mechanical resonance of an automated executioner as he descends the steps 3 at a time, followed by 2 more heavily built men in dark ballistic armor. "Deploy compliance protocols. Separate them immediately." The guards move with professional coordination, their heavy boots making a deafening, rhythmic thud against the concrete steps as they close the distance, their hands reaching for the high-voltage stun battens resting on their utility belts. They don't care about our history. They don't care about the poetry we promised to build. To them, we are simply 2 low-level system anomalies that need to be neutralized and deleted to preserve the operational efficiency of the corporate estate. I tighten my grip on the steel camera stabilizer bar, my muscles locking into a stance of absolute, uncompromising defense as the lead guard reaches the midpoint of the final flight of stairs. "Clara, step back into the window alcove," I command through my teeth, my voice calm, steady, and filled with a lethal focus that causes the descending guard to hesitate for a fraction of a second. Hold on to the backpack. Don't let go of the token. I am not leaving your side, she responds, her voice carrying a sudden, fierce resonance of defiance that matches my own internal fire. She doesn't run toward the window. Instead, she steps closer to my back, her hands gripping the fabric of my denim jacket with an intensity that tells me she would rather fall into the abyss with me tonight than return to the sterile safety of Julian's world. The lead guard recovers his composure, his face obscured behind a dark ballistic visor as he raises the stun baton, the tip of the weapon crackling with a vicious, blue arc of high-voltage electricity that illuminates the concrete walls in a series of violent flashes. "You're out of your depth, kid," he sneers, his voice distorted by his helmet's internal microphone. "This isn't a movie. You can't edit your way out of this room." "You're right," I say, my eyes locking onto the polished plastic element of his visor as I raise the heavy steel bar in front of my chest, the pale orange light of the Monday morning sun finally breaking through the shattered window behind me and casting a long, aggressive silhouette onto the back wall. This isn't a movie. In a movie, the hero tries to save everyone. Tonight, I am only here to make sure she gets to see the sunrise. Before the guard can complete his descent, I launch my body forward, stepping up onto the first concrete step to meet his charge, and the first physical collision of our absolute war explodes across the 22nd floor landing in a violent cascade of shattered metal, electric sparks, and the raw, unedited fury of two souls who have finally decided that their freedom is worth more than the survival of the entire city's corporate architecture. The steel stabilizer bar clashes against the guard's high-voltage baton with a sharp, ear-splitting metallic ring that sends a shower of blue sparks dancing across the concrete walls. The impact sends a violent vibration traveling up the bones of my arms, but I don't give him room to recover his balance. Using the momentum of my entire body weight, I drive the heavy metal bar forward into the center of his chest armor, forcing him backward against the iron railing of the stairs with a loud, mechanical thud that causes his tactical flashlight to fly from his hand and smash onto the steps below. "Get him!" the second guard roars, moving around his stumbling partner to launch a sweeping strike toward my neck with an industrial compliance club. The air inside the narrow stairwell is thick with dust, the smell of burning copper from the electric sparks, and the desperate, ragged sounds of our breathing. Every move is a calculation made in a fraction of a frame, a high-stakes sequence of survival where a single missed block means immediate neutralization. But as I dodge beneath the second guard strike, my boots sliding over the crunching fragments of shattered glass, I look past his shoulder out through the ruined ventilation window at the city skyline. The sun has officially cleared the eastern horizon, its brilliant, liquid gold light spilling across the concrete jungle like a wave of pure, unvarnished truth, burning away the cold morning fog and illuminating the path we are about to tear through their world. The countdown hasn't ended. It has simply evolved into a different kind of timeline, one where Julian's empire is currently bleeding data, his security team is losing control of the perimeter, and the two videographers who used to count the stars are about to write the final, unedited sequence of their survival in the ashes of the lives they are leaving behind. The transition from a stationary defensive position inside a concrete stairwell to absolute, kinetic acceleration is a violent recalibration of the human sensory system. My boots do not just run, they strike the cold, unyielding stone stairs with a desperate, rhythmic impact that echoes up the vertical shaft of the 22nd floor like a sequence of small explosions. Behind me, the metallic clanging of the security guards recovering from my initial counterstrike serves as a brutal metronome, marking the fractions of a second we have left before the entire floor becomes a closed trap. Clara's hand remains locked inside mine, her grip an intense, white-knuckled anchor of survival that pulls her forward through the heavy cloud of settling glass dust and the sharp, chemical smell of discharged stun batons. The main lifts are automatically isolated by the central grid. Clara pants, her voice cut into short, ragged gasps as we descend the structural steps of the service stairwell at a dangerous, breakneck pace. The silk fabric of her torn wedding gown rustles violently against the concrete walls, the elegant white train now dragging through dirt, oil stains, and glittering fragments of shattered security visors. Julian's personal security override means every exit door leading to the main lobby has been magnetically locked from the control room. If we hit the ground floor, we are walking straight into a firing squad of corporate compliance teams. "We aren't going to the lobby," I respond, my voice carrying a low, gravelly rasp of absolute conviction as I navigate a sharp, 90-degree turn on the 20th floor landing, my shoulder lightly brushing the concrete wall to maintain my balance under the intense downward momentum. The infrastructure logs I downloaded from the warehouse vault showed a secondary ventilation and maintenance shaft that exits directly into the sub-basement level 3 parking garage. That's where the hotel's auxiliary generators and service vehicles are kept. It's unmonitored by the primary AI security protocol because the system treats it as a low-priority utility sector. We plunge deeper into the architectural bowels of the Grand Imperial Hotel, leaving behind the plush carpets and golden light fixtures of the upper luxury tiers, descending into the raw, brutalist reality of unpainted concrete, exposed steel conduits, and the low, industrial hum of high-pressure air conditioning units. The air here is colder, heavy with the scent of diesel fuel, industrial lubricants, and the stale moisture of a subterranean structure buried beneath millions of tons of steel and glass. The red emergency exit lights cast long, distorted shadows of our figures against the damp walls, making us look like two digital glitches running through the veins of a dying machine. With every flight of stairs we clear, the distant, muffled sound of sirens from the city streets outside grows louder, a chaotic chorus of emergency response vehicles descending upon the hotel perimeter. But those sirens aren't coming to save us. They are the external automated response to the structural breach I created when I smashed through the 22nd floor window on a steel cable. To the city's municipal network, I am an active threat, a destructive variable that must be contained and neutralized to preserve the smooth, undisturbed flow of morning commerce. We reach the heavy, reinforced steel door marked sub-basement level 3, maintenance access. I do not check the handle. I drive my right boot forward into the center of the industrial locking mechanism with the full, accumulated weight of our downward momentum. The lock gives way with a sharp, echoing snap of fracturing steel, the heavy door swinging inward to reveal the vast, shadowy expanse of the subterranean parking garage. The ceiling is low, crisscrossed by massive concrete beams and thick bundles of black fiber optic cables that resemble the exposed nervous system of a corporate leviathan. The floor is an endless sheet of dark, polished concrete, slick with patches of condensation and old engine oil that reflect the dim, cold blue glow of the low-wattage overhead fluorescent tubes. At the far end of the eastern bay, sitting in the deep shadows beneath a massive structural column, is the vehicle, the modified black Japanese sports hatchback I had hidden here 3 days ago using a forged corporate maintenance delivery pass. Its low silhouette is a dark silhouette of absolute defiance against the clean, sterile luxury sedans parked in the VIP sections. It is a machine built out of salvaged parts, tuned for raw, unedited mechanical performance rather than executive comfort. Its twin-turbocharger engine cold and waiting in the dark like a sleeping predator. There it is, I mutter, pulling Clara across the wide, echoing space of the garage, our footsteps sounding like rapid gunfire against the polished concrete floor. Before we can reach the driver's side door, the entire subterranean garage is suddenly illuminated by a violent, blinding eruption of high-intensity halogen light. Two massive, blacked-out luxury SUVs launch themselves around the concrete ramp of the level 2 exit, their massive tires screaming against the polished surface as they execute a synchronized, military-grade sweeping maneuver that blocks the primary exit ramp to the street level. The brilliant white beams of their headlights slice through the shadows, catching Clara's white dress in a crushing glare that leaves no room for escape. Target identified in Section C4. An automated speaker horn on the lead SUV blares, its synthetic voice bouncing off the concrete ceiling with an unnatural, metallic resonance. Halt immediately. Compliance teams are authorized to use non-lethal kinetic force to secure the asset. The doors of both SUVs fly open simultaneously, and 6 heavily armed tactical security officers step out into the blinding light, their black ballistic armor reflecting the cold blue glow of the garage. They do not hesitate. They raise their high-velocity pneumatic net launchers and long-range compliance battens, their movements fast, synchronized, and completely devoid of human emotion. They are the human extensions of Julian's financial architecture, paid variables designed to eliminate any friction within his corporate estate. "Get in." I roar at Clara, throwing open the passenger door of the hatchback and shoving her inside before she can even look back at the advancing tactical line. I vault over the hood of the car, my boots sliding across the cold metal before I drop into the worn fabric of the driver's seat, my left hand already slamming the heavy mechanical key into the ignition cylinder while my right hand pulls the 5-point racing harness over my shoulders. The engine does not just start, it detonates into life with a deep, throat-tearing mechanical roar that rattles the concrete columns of the sub-basement. The custom titanium exhaust system spits a short burst of blue flame against the back wall, filling the immediate air with the sharp, beautiful smell of unburnt racing fuel and burning rubber. The dashboard lights up in a violent array of red and amber digital gauges, the needle of the tachometer bouncing against the idling limit like an animal trying to break out of its cage. "Hold on." I shout over the deafening scream of the twin turbochargers as I slam my left foot onto the heavy clutch pedal, engaging the straight-cut dogbox transmission with a loud, mechanical clunk that transmits a violent shudder straight into the frame of the car. I bury my right boot into the accelerator pedal, dumping the clutch at 6,000 RPM. The 4 high-performance tires bite into the oil-slicked polished concrete with a terrifying scream of friction. The car doesn't just move forward, it launches itself like a kinetic projectile, the rear end breaking traction for a fraction of a second in a beautiful, controlled drift before the custom all-wheel drive system locks the torque split 50-50, driving the machine straight toward the line of tactical guards. The security team does not expect a direct, uncompromising frontal charge from a civilian vehicle. The lead officer fires his pneumatic launcher, but the heavy high-tensile net merely clips the reinforced carbon fiber side mirror, tearing it from the doorframe before disappearing into the shadows behind us. The other guards scatter, throwing their bodies behind the concrete structural columns as the black hatchback streaks past their position at 70 miles per hour inside a closed room, the wind of our passage sending sheets of forgotten maintenance paperwork flying through the air like a localized storm. The exit ramp is blocked by the secondary security gate. Clara screams, her fingers digging into the dashboard as she looks ahead through the curved glass of the windshield. At the top of the concrete incline leading to the street level, a massive, industrial steel-reinforced rolling shutter is rapidly descending, its red warning lights flashing in a steady, rhythmic cadence of absolute lockdown. There are only 3 feet of clearance left between the bottom edge of the steel shutter and the asphalt surface. "I'm not stopping," I say, my voice dropping into that cold, clinical void of absolute focus where time breaks down into individual frames of video editing. My eyes lock onto the narrow gap of morning light visible beneath the descending steel barrier. I downshift into second gear, the engine screaming a terrifying, high-pitched mechanical note as the transmission matches the extreme velocity of our ascent. I pull the hydraulic handbrake lever with a short, violent upward stroke while simultaneously flicking the steering wheel 30 degrees to the left. The sports hatchback reacts with beautiful, violent precision. The rear tires break traction exactly at the base of the concrete incline, the car sliding sideways up the narrow ramp in a perfect, flat-out 4-wheel drift that minimizes our vertical profile against the descending shutter. The roof of the car passes mere millimeters beneath the jagged steel teeth of the rolling gate, the intense friction creating a massive cascade of white-hot sparks that rain down onto the windshield like a shower of falling stars. The car launches itself out of the subterranean darkness of the parking garage and into the brilliant, liquid gold reality of the Monday morning sun. The transition is blinding. The dawn light hits the curved glass of the windshield with a crushing intensity, turning the dust on the glass into a screen of pure gold for a fraction of a second before my eyes adjust to the wide, expansive landscape of the city's financial district. The asphalt of the 6-lane main avenue is empty, a long, black ribbon of unyielding stone that stretches out between towering monoliths of reflective glass and steel skyscrapers that look like giant mirrors reflecting the birth of a new day. But our freedom lasts for less than 300 meters. Behind us, Clara shouts, her voice tight with an intense, recurring wave of adrenaline as she looks into the rearview mirror. Emerging from the main entrance plaza of the Grand Imperial Hotel are 3 additional security vehicles. Not the heavy utility SUVs from the garage, but Julian's elite, high-speed interception pursuit sedans. They are low, aerodynamic machines finished in a matte, light-absorbing black paint, their roofs equipped with high-intensity strobe lights that flash in a violent, disorienting rhythm of red and blue. They carry no license plates, no official municipal markings. They are private, extrajudicial enforcers operating on corporate sovereignty rules that do not recognize the speed limits or safety laws of the city. The lead pursuit vehicle accelerates with terrifying efficiency, its high-output electric motors producing a low, unnatural whine that cuts through the mechanical roar of my internal combustion engine. Within seconds, it has closed the distance between us to less than 2 car lengths, its heavy carbon composite bull bar aligning perfectly with the rear bumper of my hatchback. They're going to execute a pit maneuver. I tell Clara, my hands adjusting my grip on the Alcantara-wrapped steering wheel, my muscles tensing for the imminent physical impact. They want to spin us into the structural pillars of the elevated railway. The lead pursuit car strikes our rear bumper with a loud, sickening crunch of fracturing plastic and metal. The impact sends a violent shockwave traveling through the frame of the sports car, the rear end immediately breaking traction at 90 miles per hour as the momentum tries to rotate our vehicle into a terminal, uncontrollable spin across the wide avenue. I don't fight the spin with sudden, panicked steering inputs. Instead, I balance the car on the absolute edge of mechanical adhesion, keeping my right foot buried deep into the accelerator pedal to maintain the torque flow through the front wheels while using small, rapid counter-steering corrections to guide the slide through the wide, empty lanes of the avenue. The tires smoke violently, leaving long, black scars of molten rubber across the pristine grey asphalt as the car slides sideways down the street at highway speeds. A beautiful, chaotic dance of survival against the clean backdrop of the financial district. Clara, the stabilizer bar, under your seat. I shout over the screaming chorus of the tires and the roaring engine. There's a manual override switch on the central console, the red toggle labeled auxiliary pump. Flip it now. She moves with instant, unhesitating trust, her body straining against the high-performance harness as she reaches down into the narrow space between our seats. Her fingers find the industrial toggle switch and flick it upward with a sharp, mechanical click. Instantly, the auxiliary fuel pump inside the rear cargo bay activates with a high-pitched whine, delivering a massive, unrestricted flow of high-octane fuel directly into the secondary injection rail of the engine. The twin turbochargers respond with a sudden, violent increase in boost pressure that sounds like a jet engine entering afterburner territory. The car stops sliding, the all-wheel drive system gripping the asphalt with a sudden, bone-crushing force that launches us forward at an accelerated velocity, pulling us away from the front bumper of the pursuit sedan just as it moves in for a second, terminal strike. The pursuit cars do not back down. They realign themselves into a tight, V-shaped tactical formation behind us, their high-intensity strobe lights creating a chaotic, shifting canvas of color against the glass facades of the skyscrapers we are leaving behind. They are forcing us toward the Eastern Industrial Highway, a long, elevated section of asphalt that crosses the city's shipping canals via a massive, vertical lift steel bridge. As the car streaks toward the entrance ramp of the elevated highway, the morning sun hits the dashboard clock, its digital numbers shifting with cold, unyielding precision to 5:25 a.m. The city is beginning to wake up. In the distance, the first early morning delivery trucks and commuter vehicles are appearing at the intersections, their drivers looking on in absolute, wide-eyed disbelief as a battered, black sports car with a torn bumper and a girl in a white wedding dress zooms past them at triple-digit speeds, pursued by a silent, terrifying armada of corporate executioners. The bridge, Clara says, her eyes fixed on the horizon ahead, her voice dropping into a low register of profound concern. Julian controls the municipal transit grid for the Eastern District. He can command the city AI to raise the lift bridge from his control desk. If he cuts our route to the outer zone, we'll be trapped on an elevated platform with nowhere left to run. Then we'll have to move faster than his system can process the command, I say, my face reflecting the cold, liquid gold light of the morning as I shift into fifth gear, the needle of the tachometer sweeping toward the red line as the car accelerates onto the long, straight expanse of the asphalt bridge, the wind howling through the ruined side mirror frame like the voice of a world we are systematically leaving behind us in the dust. The concept of structural limits is a comforting lie designed for people who have something left to lose. When you are operating inside the clean, regulated boundaries of ordinary society, a red light, a closed gate, or a warning siren is an absolute command to halt, a signal to surrender your momentum to the governing architecture of the state. But when you have spent the last 3 hours systematically dismantling the financial blackmail matrix of a multi-billion-dollar banking empire, the physical world ceases to be a collection of rules. It becomes nothing more than a sequence of frames that you must edit through with sheer, unadulterated velocity. The asphalt of the elevated Eastern Highway stretches out before the cracked windshield of my hatchback like a long, grey blade cutting through the morning mist. The twin-turbocharged engine is no longer just running. It is screaming at 9,000 RPM, its mechanical pitch a deafening, metallic wail that vibrates through the carbon fiber dashboard, through the aluminum floorboards, and straight into the marrow of my bones. My left hand is locked onto the steering wheel with a grip so violent that my fingers have lost all sensation, while my right hand hovers over the gear selector, ready to force the dogbox transmission into its absolute mechanical threshold. Beside me, Clara has her eyes locked onto the horizon ahead. The pale, liquid gold light of the 5:30 a.m. sun hits her face, illuminating the sharp, elegant lines of her silhouette against the dark fabric of the racing seat. The torn fragments of her white wedding gown are rustling violently against the door frame, a beautiful, tragic mess of ruined silk and expensive lace that serves as the ultimate visual record of our defiance. She isn't screaming. She isn't crying out for me to stop. She has crossed the same psychological event horizon that I did when I jumped out of that studio window. She knows that behind us lies a lifetime of golden cages, corporate ownership, and silent, unrequited grief. Ahead of us lies nothing but the open sky and the terrifying poetry of our survival. The bridge is moving, Clara says, her voice remarkably calm, carrying a low, vibrating resonance of absolute trust that causes my chest to tighten with a fierce, protective fury. Through the curved glass of the windshield, the central span of the massive steel vertical lift bridge is changing its geometry. The heavy industrial warning bells are clanging in a rapid, frantic rhythm, their mechanical sound echoing across the open water of the shipping channel like a funeral march. Julian's control over the city's municipal transit network has finally materialized into a physical barrier. The central steel platform, a 100,000-ton structure of reinforced iron and asphalt, is slowly, systematically rising into the cold morning air, separating itself from the approach ramp at a sharp, steep angle that creates an artificial cliff against the sky. The gap between the concrete edges is already 6 feet wide, a dark, yawning chasm of absolute nothingness that reveals the deep blue, churning waters of the industrial shipping canal 80 feet below. And with every passing second, as the massive counterweights of the bridge descend into their tracks, the gap is widening, 8 feet, 10 feet, 12 feet. I glance into the rearview mirror. The 3 black matte interception sedans are still locked onto our position, their high-intensity red and blue strobe lights casting a chaotic, shifting grid of color across the gray asphalt behind us. They aren't slowing down either. Julian's security detail has been ordered to retrieve Clara at any cost, but as they see the rising structure of the lift bridge ahead, the lead vehicle suddenly executes a violent, panicked braking maneuver. Its high-performance tires lock up instantly, emitting a deafening, high-pitched shriek of friction as it slides sideways across the highway, leaving behind long, black scars of smoking rubber before crashing heavily into the concrete guardrail. They are employees. They work for a salary. They understand the financial calculation of risk versus reward. They are not going to leap into the abyss for a corporate contract. But I am not working for a salary. I am running a timeline that was written 10 years ago under a leaking bus stop roof, and my budget for survival has no limits. Clara, I say, my voice dropping into that quiet, hyper-focused void where the noise of the engine and the screaming sirens disappear into absolute silence. Do you remember the final scene of the project we designed on the swing set? The one where the characters run out of asphalt. Clara looks away from the rising steel structure ahead and turns her head to look directly into my eyes. A soft, beautiful smile cuts through the dust and sweat on her face, her brilliant dark eyes reflecting the golden fire of the dawn sky. She reaches out her left hand, her freezing fingers wrapping around my right wrist, reinforcing my grip on the gear selector with everything she has left. They didn't stop, she whispers, her voice carrying the absolute, unedited truth of her soul. They turned the camera toward the sun, and they jumped. Then let's finish the cut, I respond. I bury my right foot into the floorboards, forcing the accelerator pedal past its physical stop. The auxiliary fuel pump responds with a high-pitched, screaming whine as a massive, unrestricted charge of racing fuel detonates inside the cylinders. The boost gauge on the pillar explodes past the red line, the twin turbochargers forcing an immense, pressurized wave of air into the intake manifold that sounds like a localized hurricane. The sports hatchback takes a sudden, violent leap forward, the sheer kinetic acceleration pinning our bodies deep into the racing harnesses as the vehicle reaches 115 miles per hour on the final, upward incline of the approach ramp. The concrete edge of the rising bridge span fills my entire universe. It looks like a massive, jagged wall of grey stone and iron teeth rising up to meet our impact. The car hits the apex of the ramp. The mechanical connection between our tires and the earth ceases to exist. The deafening roar of the twin-turbocharged engine, the screaming friction of the wind, and the heavy vibrations of the suspension system disappear instantly, replaced by a sudden, terrifying vacuum of absolute silence. The black sports car launches itself out into the open sky, its chassis suspended mid-air 80 feet above the shipping channel like a kinetic sculpture of pure defiance. Time stops. Inside the cabin, the laws of gravity dissolve into a beautiful, weightless suspension of reality. A small, forgotten plastic lens cap from my tactical backpack lifts off the passenger floorboards, floating lazily through the air between our seats like a tiny satellite. The glittering fragments of structural glass that had been embedded in my denim jacket lift away from the fabric, hovering around our shoulders like a cloud of frozen diamonds catching the brilliant, liquid gold rays of the morning sun. Through the side windows, the entire panorama of the metropolis is laid bare before us, an immense, silent matrix of mirrored glass skyscrapers, cold concrete grids, and golden river channels stretching out toward the horizon under a sky of violent purple and soft orange clouds. It is the world that had tried to separate us, the world that had traded Clara's freedom for a banking transaction, the world that had forced me to document my own ruin through a camera lens. But from this vantage point, suspended in the open space between the structures, the entire corporate empire looks small, fragile, and completely powerless against the momentum of our leap. We are flying. For 3 seconds, we are completely detached from the balance sheets, the contracts, and the legal frameworks of Julian's world. We are two unedited characters running through a scene that no executive could ever supervise, holding hands in the dark while the universe catches fire around us. Then, the opposite downward ramp of the bridge rushes up to meet our descent. The landing is a brutal, apocalyptic return to physical reality. The front tires strike the downward concrete slope of the far span with a bone-crushing, metal-tearing impact that bottoms out the custom racing suspension instantly. A massive, violent cascade of white-hot sparks erupts from beneath the front bumper as the aluminum skid plate grinds heavily against the rough asphalt. The sound a deafening mechanical scream that echoes off the steel trusses of the bridge. The rear end of the car slams down a fraction of a second later, the sudden transfer of weight causing the vehicle to bounce dangerously toward the edge of the elevated guardrail. The steering wheel wrenches violently in my hands, trying to rip itself away from my grip as the car threatens to enter a terminal, high-speed spin across the 4 lanes of the highway. The tires smoke furiously, emitting a thick, acrid cloud of burning rubber that fills the cabin through the shattered side mirror frame. I don't slam on the brakes. I keep my foot steady on the accelerator, using the all-wheel drive system's torque vectoring to pull the front end of the hatchback back into a straight line. I fight the physics of the impact with everything my upper body has to offer, my muscles screaming in protest as I force the machine to submit to my trajectory. The car skids sideways for 50 meters, its tires fighting for adhesion against the cold asphalt, before the high-performance rubber finally bites into the stone. The hatchback straightens out with a sharp, violent jerk of the chassis, accelerating down the descending slope of the bridge and away from the lift gap at 90 miles per hour. I glance into the rearview mirror. On the opposite side of the channel, the remaining black interception sedans are parked at the edge of the rising steel span, their red and blue strobe lights reflecting uselessly off the metal trusses. Their security guards are standing outside their vehicles, their arms resting on their hips as they stare across the widening void at the black sports car that had just defied the absolute physical limitations of their system. They are trapped behind the very wall their master had built to contain us. "We made it," Clara whispers, her fingers slowly releasing their white-knuckled grip on my wrist as she looks back through the shattered rear window at the widening gap of the lift bridge behind us. A profound, breathtaking gasp of pure liberation escapes her lips, her chest heaving as the reality of her freedom finally settles into her soul. "We are across, Gemini. We are out." "We are out of the hotel zone," I correct her, my voice low, steady, but filled with a deep, lingering tension as I check the digital display of the field laptop sitting in the open tactical backpack on the backseat. But Julian isn't going to let his entire asset matrix disappear into the outer district without a fight. He knows we have the hard drive token. He knows his digital vault has been erased. Right now, he is watching his security monitor's realization that his empire is bleeding out. He will deploy everything he has left in the metropolitan sector to intercept us before we can reach the border lines. On the field laptop monitor, a localized satellite mapping system is tracking our movement down the industrial highway. But as I watch the display, 3 new crimson alerts begin to flash along the perimeter lines of the outer industrial zone, the transport choke points where the main avenue connects to the national shipping highways. Julian had already anticipated the possibility of a successful transit escape. He has activated his secondary corporate containment protocol, mobilizing heavy industrial transport vehicles and private border security elements to create an absolute blockade across the exit corridors of the city. The network is closing its outer perimeter, transforming the entire metropolitan area into a massive, closed loop where every road leads back to his jurisdiction. I look at the silver key necklace resting against my chest, its old metal catching the warm, golden glare of the morning sun as we streak past the abandoned warehouses and industrial silos of the outer docks. We have deleted the data, we have jumped the bridge, and we have torn down the golden cage of the high-rise district. But the real hunt has officially begun, and to survive the final cut of this sequence, we are going to have to take this machine off the asphalt entirely, entering a world of shadows and unmapped roads where his corporate algorithms cannot track our footprints. I turn the steering wheel sharply to the right, driving the sports car off the main highway ramp and into the labyrinth of the old Western Railway yards, the black hatchback disappearing into the thick, low-hanging industrial smoke of the outer zone as the city behind us erupts into a full-scale corporate manhunt under the brilliant, unfeeling glare of the morning sun. The map is a corporate illusion. When you look at a digital screen, with its clean blue navigation lines, neatly labeled districts, and automated traffic flow updates, you are not looking at the actual Earth. You are looking at a controlled network, a geometric cage designed by algorithms to keep human behavior predictable, quantifiable, and easily managed by central data servers. Julian's entire empire functions on this clean geography. His security teams know exactly how many seconds it takes an enforcement vehicle to reach any coordinate on the grid. But if you drop below the grid, if you force your machine into the blind spots where the fiber optic cables end and the old iron begins, the system begins to choke on its own calculations. The tires of my hatchback transition from the smooth, resonant hum of the elevated highway asphalt to the chaotic, bone-rattling violence of crushed gravel and rotten wooden railway ties. The car drops 2 feet down an unpaved embankment, the front aluminum skid plate scraping against a rusted iron spike with a sharp, metallic scream that registers as a violent jolt in my steering column. We have entered the Western Railway Yards, a massive, 300-acre dead zone of decaying steel infrastructure, abandoned repair sheds, and forgotten shipping containers that date back 40 years before the city's financial district was even conceptualized. Here, the air is thick with a different kind of history. It smells of sulfur, stagnant river water, old lubricating grease, and the cold, damp moisture of heavy iron structures that have spent decades absorbing the soot of industrial coal and diesel. The morning sun, now higher on the horizon, struggles to penetrate this sector. Its light is chopped into thin, pale orange stripes by the endless rows of abandoned freight train carriages that stretch out like silent, rusting leviathans in the morning fog. The internal GPS is completely dead, Clara says, her eyes locked onto the dashboard display where the factory navigation map is spinning in a useless, frantic circle, its digital interface flashing a continuous amber alert. Signal lost, recalibrating. She shifts her weight against the 5-point harness, her hand steadying the field laptop on her lap. The dark blue light of the monitor reflects off the sweat on her forehead, casting a cold, digital glow over her dirt-stained white silk dress. The primary network can't find our vehicle's transponder anymore. We are officially offline. That's exactly what I was counting on. I grunt, my muscles straining against the unassisted steering rack as I manually wrench the car through a sharp, 90-degree turn between 2 massive walls of rotting wooden cargo boxes. Julian's enforcement units are trained to follow predictive transit modeling. If they can't track our data signature, they have to rely on visual patrol sweeps, and inside this labyrinth of old iron, a car is just a needle in a mountain of scrap metal. I downshift into second gear, the straight-cut gears of the dogbox transmission whining in a high-pitched, mechanical protest that echoes off the hollow steel bodies of the surrounding train cars. I keep the engine speed low, modulating the throttle to avoid spinning the tires on the slick, oil-saturated gravel path. This isn't about speed anymore, it's about navigation, finding the narrow, unmapped corridors that cut through the core of the industrial yard toward the unmonitored western perimeter fence. For 3 minutes, we move like a ghost through the industrial graveyard. The black silhouette of the hatchback glides beneath massive, overhead crane tracks that look like the skeletons of forgotten prehistoric monsters. We weave through narrow gaps where the clearance between my side doors and the jagged, rusted edges of train steps is measured in fractions of an inch. Every shadow is a potential hiding place, and every blind corner is a calculated gamble against survival. But the silence of the yard is a fragile, deceptive shield. A sudden, violent vibration begins to rattle the cracked glass of the windshield, not from the uneven ground below, but from the air above. The low, rhythmic, thunderous thumping of high-velocity rotor blades cuts through the mechanical hum of my engine, growing louder with every passing second until the sheer acoustic pressure causes the metal body panels of the car to hum like a tuning fork. Helicopter! Clara shouts, leaning forward to look through the upper edge of the windshield. Before I can react, a massive, blinding column of high-intensity white light drops out of the sky, piercing through the low-hanging industrial fog with the force of a physical blow. The searchlight hits the hood of our hatchback, turning the black carbon fiber skin into a sheet of pure, blinding white that reflects straight into my eyes, obliterating my vision in an instant. The tactical chopper, a matte black aerospatial corporate interceptor with no registration markings, hovers mere 50 feet above our roof, its downwash creating a localized hurricane that sweeps gravel, old paper, and industrial dust across our path in a chaotic swirl. Target confirmed in the western grid sector. A voice booms down from an external megaphone system on the aircraft, its synthetic volume obliterating the sound of the wind. You are trespassing on private corporate infrastructure. Kill the engine immediately and step away from the vehicle. Compliance teams are approaching your coordinates. They didn't find us through data, I hiss, squinting through the blinding glare as I try to follow the dark, blurred outline of the path ahead by pure memory. They used thermal imaging sweeps from the sky. The heat signature of our twin-turbocharger engine is glowing like a flare on their cockpit displays. Gemini, the path ahead is closed. Clara calls out, her voice tight with an intense, sudden wave of alarm. Through the shifting curtain of dust and searchlight glare, I see the trap. 50 meters ahead, a massive, double-tracked iron freight train has been parked directly across the main corridor of the yard, completely sealing off the exit route with a solid, impenetrable wall of dark green steel. There is no space to drift around it, no ramp to jump over it. To our left is a concrete storage warehouse. To our right is a line of rotting fuel tankers. We are trapped in a dead-end corridor of iron, pinned down from above by a 5-ton aerial hunter that is systematically guiding the ground enforcement team straight to our throat. Hold on to the laptop, I say, my voice dropping into that absolute, unedited stillness that comes when all ordinary options have been wiped off the timeline. I do not step on the brakes. Instead, I flick the steering wheel 45 degrees to the right, driving the sports hatchback straight toward the narrow, dark gap beneath the massive steel chassis of the rotting fuel tankers. The clearance between the gravel ground and the heavy steel axles of the train cars is less than 4.5 feet. Ordinary sedans would be crushed instantly, their roofs torn off by the low-hanging brake assemblies and iron couplings. But the hatchback has been built for the low profiles of underground street racing. I reach down and slam the auxiliary air suspension toggle switch, a custom system I had integrated into the subframe using salvaged components from a heavy transport yard. With a sharp, high-pressure hiss of escaping nitrogen gas, the entire chassis of the car drops an additional 3 inches, slamming the oil pan down until it is riding mere millimeters above the uneven stones. We dive beneath the belly of the train. The world becomes a terrifying, fast-forward blur of absolute claustrophobia. The heavy, black iron axles of the fuel tanker streak past just inches above our heads, the mechanical noise of our passage beneath the hollow steel chambers transforming into a deafening, metallic roar that sounds like we are inside the barrel of a firing cannon. Sparks fly continuously from my roof rails as they brush against old, dangling brake lines, filling the dark space beneath the carriages with a brilliant, chaotic display of white and gold light. Clara ducks her head instinctively, pulling the field laptop tight against her chest as the shadow of the giant machine passes over us like an eclipse. The searchlight from the helicopter above hits the top of the train carriages, its beam blocked by the heavy steel hulls, leaving us momentarily wrapped in the cold, protective dark of the undercarriage. The hatchback pops out the opposite side of the train line, its tires biting into a narrow, unmaintained gravel trail that runs parallel to the old Western Shipping Canal. The helicopter above is momentarily disoriented by our sudden disappearance beneath the physical block of the train, its massive searchlight sweeping the wrong side of the track for 5 critical seconds. I use those 5 seconds to extinguish my main headlights, switching to the low-intensity amber fog lights that sit beneath the bumper, invisible from the sky unless the aircraft is directly in front of us. The perimeter line is just across this old switching yard, I tell Clara, my eyes hunting through the gloom for the final structural barrier. There's an old maintenance gate that leads directly to the unmapped dirt roads of the outer agricultural zone. If we can break through that gate before the ground units establish a hard line, we are into the open country where their corporate jurisdiction has no legal weight. We have a problem, Clara says, her finger pointing at the laptop screen where the satellite override system has managed to capture a low-resolution thermal scan of the perimeter fence. Julian's ground teams didn't wait for the helicopter to guide them. They've already stationed 2 heavy tactical transport trucks at the main gate. They've turned their vehicles sideways, creating a solid wall of reinforced steel across the exit. They're waiting for us to hit them. Through the morning mist, the outline of the western gate comes into view. The 2 heavy tactical trucks are massive, military-grade machines equipped with reinforced steel bull bars and high-intensity strobe lights that cut through the fog like red and blue blades. 6 tactical officers are stationed along the line, their high-velocity firearms raised and locked onto the approach path. They have created an absolute checkpoint, a final, uncompromising statement of corporate power that leaves no room for negotiation. "We can't ram them," Clara says, her voice carrying a rare, trembling edge of uncertainty as she evaluates the sheer physical mass of the trucks ahead. "The weight difference is too great. Our frame will collapse before we can displace their center of gravity." "I'm not going to ram them," I say, my face reflecting the cold amber glow of the dashboard gauges as I shift into 3rd gear, the engine responding with a deep, resonant growl of absolute commitment. "We are going to use the infrastructure they forgot to delete." To the right of the main maintenance gate, running parallel to the fence line, is an old, abandoned wooden loading dock, a raised platform of rotting oak beams and iron brackets that was once used to transfer grain from farm trucks to the cargo trains. The end of the wooden platform has decayed over 40 years, creating a natural, wedge-shaped incline that rises 4 feet above the gravel ground before terminating directly above the concrete support wall of the perimeter fence. It is a ramp, unintentional, unmapped, and completely invisible to a digital security algorithm that only tracks active roads. "Hold on!" I shout, my voice a roaring declaration of war against the grid as I lock both hands onto the steering wheel and line up the right side of my car with the base of the decaying wooden platform. The hatchback hits the rotting timbers at 70 miles per hour. The wooden loading dock explodes beneath our weight. Massive shards of old oak and ancient iron bolts fly through the air like shrapnel, the car's high-performance suspension groaning under the extreme structural load as the vehicle climbs the improvised incline. The car tilts dangerously to the left, riding on 2 wheels for a fraction of a second as the chassis clears the top edge of the concrete perimeter fence, bypassing the heavy tactical trucks completely by traveling through the open space above their line of sight. The tactical guards look up in absolute, jaw-dropping disbelief as a battered black sports car flies over their heads, its undercarriage catching the brilliant gold light of the morning sun as it clears their blockade by less than 12 inches. The car slams down onto the rough, unmapped dirt road of the outer agricultural district with a violent, spine-chilling impact that shatters the remaining passenger side mirror and sends a cloud of grey dust billowing 60 feet into the morning air. The rear tires spin wildly on the loose soil, fighting for traction against the earth before the all-wheel drive system locks the differentials, clawing the machine forward through the overgrown weeds and open fields of the border zone. Behind us, the industrial yard, the helicopter, the tactical trucks, and the entire high-rise matrix of Julian's financial empire begin to recede into the distance, turning into a silent, grey silhouette against a sky that is now completely awash in the liquid gold and deep purple of a new day. We are off the map. We are running on dirt, on stone, on unedited land where the algorithms have no names, and for the first time in 10 years, the timeline belongs entirely to us. The transition from a closed structural cage to the absolute infinity of the open horizon is an experience that cannot be quantified by data. When you spend your entire life navigating the narrow corridors of an engineered society, your mind adapts to the geometry of walls. You learn to breathe in intervals determined by traffic lights, you measure your value by the financial metrics on a corporate server, and you write your stories within the strict character limits of a pre-approved script. But when you break through the final perimeter fence, when the concrete blocks disappear and give way to thousands of acres of wild, golden wheat fields stretching out under a vast, unfeeling sky, the brain undergoes a violent, beautiful recalibration. The tires of my modified sports hatchback are no longer screaming against oil-slicked concrete or crushed industrial gravel. They are humming a low, continuous, rhythmic note against the old, cracked asphalt of Route 99, a forgotten, multi-lane national highway that cuts straight through the agricultural heartland of the outer border zone. The machine is dying beneath us, and we both know it. The front suspension is completely collapsed from the impact of the loading dock jump. The steering column pulls violently to the left with every rotation of the wheels, and a thick, lazy plume of white radiator steam is escaping through the warped gaps of the carbon fiber hood, streaking across the cracked windshield like a veil of hot mist. But the engine, the beaten, battered, twin-turbocharged heart of this machine, refuses to surrender. It continues to roar at a steady 5,000 RPM, its mechanical pitch no longer an aggressive scream of panic, but a deep, resonant, heavy thrum of absolute finality. It has carried us out of the high-rise district, through the subterranean dark of the Imperial Hotel, and across the yawning chasm of the rising lift bridge. It has done its job, and now it is simply running out the remaining frames of its existence. Beside me, Clara is staring out the side window. The brilliant, liquid gold rays of the 6 a.m. sun are pouring through the shattered glass frame where her mirror used to be, washing over her face in a wave of warm, uninterrupted light. The dust and soot from the railway yard have settled into the fine lines of her skin, and her torn white wedding gown is covered in dark patches of engine oil and grease. Yet, as she watches the endless rows of golden wheat stalks dancing in the morning wind, she looks more alive than she ever did in the pristine, sterile luxury of Julian's penthouse. The golden cage has been completely dismantled, and the bird is finally learning the true weight of the sky. On her lap, the field laptop is humming its own final song. The internal cooling fans are screaming at maximum velocity as the system handles the massive, complex encryption sequence required to unlock the final token from the stolen hard drive. The dark blue interface of the monitor is a frantic cascade of white code lines, processing bars, and network status indicators that flash with a steady, unyielding urgency. The global satellite uplink is holding at 82%, Clara says, her voice low, steady, and entirely free of the terror that had chased us through the city streets. She doesn't look at the screen. Her eyes remain fixed on the horizon ahead, where the sky transitions from a deep, bruised purple into a brilliant, bleeding orange. The independent journalism networks, the decentralized public ledgers, and the open-source legal repositories are all aligned on the reception grid. They are waiting for the encryption key, Gemini. The moment I press this final command, Julian's entire blackmail matrix, every hidden contract, every falsified asset sheet, and every digital identity anchor he used to leverage his control over this sector will be broadcast to every terminal on the planet. Do it, I say, my voice carrying the quiet, clinical weight of a director calling for the final cut of a lifetime production. Her right index finger hovers over the mechanical return key of the laptop for a fraction of a second. It is a tiny, unremarkable movement, a physical action that requires less than a single calorie of human energy. But within that movement lies the structural collapse of a multi-billion-dollar banking dynasty. It is the definitive erasure of a system that had tried to turn her life into a corporate asset and my memories into a deleted file. She presses the key. The laptop screen does not flash or erupt into a celebratory graphic. It simply drops into a deep, solid black, followed by a single line of small, grey text that scrolls across the center of the panel. Transmission complete. Multicast succeeded. Grid disconnected. Instantly, the small, circular silver key necklace resting against my chest feels lighter, as if the old metal has finally been purged of its historical burden. 10 years of hidden data, 10 years of silent, unrequited grief, and 10 years of running through the background of a story that wasn't mine. All of it has just dissolved into the global ether, transformed into an unerasable public record that no corporate injunction can ever suppress. It's over, Clara whispers, her hands slowly falling away from the keyboard, dropping onto the torn silk of her gown. She lets out a long, ragged, trembling breath that sounds like it has been trapped in her lungs since the night her father signed her first trust contract. He can't pull us back anymore, Gemini. Even if his security teams cross the borderline, the leverage is gone. The file is empty. There is nothing left for him to own. I glance into the rearview mirror one last time. The long, straight stretch of Route 99 behind us is completely empty. There are no black matte interception sedans, no flashing red and blue strobe lights, and no tactical helicopters cutting through the morning mist. The corporate enforcers have stopped at the municipal borderlines. Without the data matrix to guide their parameters, without the legal immunity of their corporate estate, they are nothing more than private citizens in expensive body armor, powerless against the open reality of the world outside the grid. The dashboard clock clicks with a soft, mechanical sound, the digital numbers shifting to exactly 6:05 a.m. The engine begins to sputter. The oil pressure gauge drops into the critical red zone, and a deep, metallic knocking sound begins to echo from the cylinder block as the bearings finally give way under the intense, accumulated thermal stress of the chase. The white cloud of steam from the radiator grows thicker, completely blanketing the front windshield in a warm, opaque mist that forces me to lift my foot off the accelerator pedal. I guide the coasting hatchback off the main asphalt lanes of the highway, letting its remaining momentum carry it onto a narrow, unpaved gravel pull-off at the edge of a massive, elevated cliff that overlooks the Western River Basin. The tires crunch slowly over the loose stone before coming to a complete, final halt beneath the shadow of an old, weathered wooden telephone pole that has stood there for half a century. With a final, gasping shudder of the pistons, the twin-turbocharged engine shuts down. The silence that follows is deafening. It is not the hostile, tense silence of a hiding place or the sterile quiet of a corporate boardroom. It is the vast, deep, majestic silence of nature waking up under an open sky. The only sounds left in our universe are the rhythmic, metallic ticking of the cooling exhaust pipes beneath the chassis, the soft rustle of the morning wind moving through the endless miles of golden wheat, and the slow, synchronized sound of our own breathing. I reach down and unclip the 5-point racing harness, the heavy metal buckle releasing with a sharp click that sounds like the breaking of a link. I push open the driver's side door, its hinges groaning in protest, and step out onto the solid, unyielding earth. The morning air hits my face, cold, clean, and completely free of the chemical, industrial taste of the metropolitan center. It smells of damp earth, wild grass, and the infinite potential of a day that has not been scheduled by a computer server. Clara steps out from the passenger side, her boots sinking lightly into the soft gravel. She does not look back at the distant, grey silhouette of the city skyscrapers that cut into the eastern horizon like a row of broken teeth. She looks forward, toward the vast, open valley below us, where the river loops through the landscape like a ribbon of pure, liquid silver reflecting the pink and gold clouds of the sky. She walks over to the front of the car, leaning her body lightly against the dented, heat-warped carbon fiber hood, her fingers tracing the long, jagged scratches left by the railway yard fences. I walk up beside her, my hands dropping into the pockets of my torn denim jacket, my eyes tracking the slow, beautiful movement of a solitary hawk circling in the thermal currents high above the basin. "What happens now?" she asks softly, her voice carrying no anxiety, no fear of the unknown, only a deep, peaceful curiosity about a timeline that has no script. The project we wrote on the swing set. It ended at the jump. We never designed the scene that comes after the screen goes black. I reach into my jacket pocket and pull out the old, scratched camera body, the one that had captured her silhouette through the studio glass 3 hours ago, the one that had documented the fractions of our survival. The battery indicator is flashing a single, terminal red bar, its electronic life running out just like the engine below us. I raise the viewfinder to my eye and frame the landscape. I don't look for the perfect rule of thirds. I don't adjust the exposure settings to match a corporate aesthetic standard. I simply lock the lens onto her face, catching the way the golden dawn light hits her dark eyes, the way the wind blows the loose strands of her hair across her cheeks, and the way her smile cuts through the dust of our escape. The scene after the cut doesn't need to be designed, Clara, I say, my finger resting gently on the mechanical shutter button. That's the secret of the unedited timeline. You don't write it in advance. You just live through the frame, and you let the camera roll. I press the button. The mechanical shutter clicks with a sharp, clean, definitive sound that echoes across the open valley. On the small digital display of the camera, the image freezes for a fraction of a second, a permanent, unerasable record of a girl in a ruined wedding dress smiling at the edge of a new world, completely free, completely unknown, and completely alive. Then, the red battery light flashes 3 times and the screen goes dark, leaving nothing behind but the physical reality of the horizon stretching out before us into an infinite, beautiful infinity. The camera drops to my chest, hanging by its worn fabric strap. I reach out my hand, and Clara's fingers wrap around mine, her grip no longer a desperate anchor of survival, but a calm, warm, permanent connection that requires no network to validate its existence. We turn our faces away from the camera, away from the past, and away from the city of glass, stepping off the gravel path and walking together down the long, unpaved dirt trail that descends into the Golden Valley, our footsteps leaving faint, beautiful tracks in the soil that the morning wind will slowly wash away into the history of the earth.